Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Morning, afternoon, evening. Trying to cover my bases. It was a long night last night, okay? Long night last night. Ugh. Here we are. How we feeling? How you guys doing? What's up? Hi, Dylan Bowser. How's it going? How's it going? How you feeling? What are you up to? Oh, man. We got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to cover. Cacophony says today is amazing. Dylan Bowser says, yeah, I passed the fuck out before most of it went down. Peter Burrito says, I've arrived with memories of shirtless Wick. Yeah, it's a wild night. Blacktoid, we're live, by the way.
Hey, what's up, Wick?
Well, you know. How's it going, man?
It's going okay. I just got banned from your Comrade Destiny server.
What did you do?
I said I think the exact quote was the best part is they thought we weren't The best part is they thought we weren't going to do Project 2025. It was like some kind of
Oh, you were trolling a little bit?
Yeah, I was trolling a little bit.
Yeah.
I trolled a little bit too close to the sun and at a sensitive time, I think.
People are sensitive. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I get it. It was kind of a gut punch. It was. I mean, I know that you don't like it or that you don't mind it, but it was a gut punch. But it is interesting to see how people process this, right? How people go through the different stages. Grief, like you got denial, bargaining, anger, then eventually you get to acceptance. I think a lot of people are taking their time. I think a lot of people are on the anger stage or the denial stage. Problem, right? But I give them a day, give them a couple days. I always give people a couple days after an election like this, right? Process, get it out of their system. Hopefully, they'll calm down, right? But we'll see.
We'll see.
Hey, what's up? We are live, by the way.
Howdy.
Ni hao. How's it going?
Very un-American of you on this day where we're all feeling super American. All right. I want to hear fucking howdies and yeehaws. Okay. I don't want to hear this chai com form of introduction. Okay, brother.
Ni howdy. I'll combine them. Okay.
There you go.
Oh man, it was a long night. A long night last night, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think it was a long night for everybody.
Yeah.
I didn't stream.
6.
I was like, people are like, dude, are you going to stream? And I'm like, dude, there are so many good streams to watch. Like, just hang out with me in the Discord. Like, I do not have the production value, the resources, or any of that shit to other people. The hubris to think that, like, I should pull from those channels so that you guys can watch me bitch about how I don't like either candidate. It's just like is wild to me. Like, just like fucking like, no, go watch those streams. We'll hang out. Like, we'll be back tomorrow. And also, I thought we were going to be up like for days wondering,
I did too. I thought we were going to be like counting still. And we are, to be clear. I don't think they've finished counting in all the counties, but the result is absolutely clear at this point.
I think Nevada and Arizona still aren't called.
Yeah,
but it's Trump. No, for sure we know. But like, and I know that there's a lot of California votes that haven't been counted yet. So it's possible that the popular vote margin shrinks, but I'd bet quite a bit that Trump maintains his lead.
Mm-hmm. We're killing time, by the way, until Econoboy gets here, so we can start the show, right? Kind of hanging out. I'd like people equally represented across the spectrum. Does that make sense? Right? We got some on the left, some on the right, some of the more moderate left, some of the more extreme left, some of the more moderate Republicans, some of the more extreme conservative types, right? Anyway, I'm
a wild card. It's okay. I get it. I'm sure.
it has been a little disturbing to me, actually, seeing some of the responses to the Trump win. From my side, to be clear.
Like,
well, I'm in a group chat where
Mhm.
they are unironically talking about holding their own January 6th and
okay.
killing monarchists.
hmm
I don't think it's
Monarchists.
serious.
What?
Look,
Did the
I'm
Hoppians win an election that I was unaware of?
I'm just saying,
Based.
okay?
Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
no,
Again, they're just I think it's just blowing off steam, right? But man, oh man, it's not good. You don't want to be doing that, right? So it's what it is.
I'm kind of hoping that like the Democrats get really petty and like Joe Biden steps down just so that Kamala Harris can be the first female president
Genuinely,
just for like
what
2 months. I think it'd just be funny and petty. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like it would be good or bad for the country, right? Like, but it just would be funny to me.
You were saying Staxiums?
What group chat are you in? Like, is this buddies of yours?
I'm not
or is this
gonna.
like...
I'm no snitch. Okay.
No. I was just wondering.
No, it's not. They're not my friends.
Are they friends
but,
of yours? Okay,
They're people I'm acquainted with, if you will.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Fed boy.
Okay. But let's just say
Yeah.
this.
What are their addresses?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but Boy's gonna be a little late, so we're just gonna get this party started. There's a lot actually to cover and talk about, and we got to get through it. So we're gonna start right off the bat with just introductions and initial thoughts. And we're gonna go first to actually Staxiums, and we'll let Lactoid
Sure.
finish this off. Staxiums, what happened?
I am a little worried about overfitting the data, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like,
No, I get
everyone's...
it that like we're still waiting, we're still
Yeah.
collating, we're still going through, but we're talking
Yeah, so
gut
these are-
initial impressions.
These are
right?
these are gut initial reactions, because obviously, I mean, I kind of felt like it was still a coin flip up until yesterday, but it seems to be that the issue on almost every American's minds was inflation. That like, you look at this with other OECD countries, like with the response to COVID, almost none of the incumbent governments have stayed in power. And I think it is that a lot of the American people would prefer low inflation to low unemployment, which is kind of a crazy... I don't know if that's accurate, but that seems to be a little accurate, that they would rather a bunch of people suffer, or sorry, a few people suffer greatly rather than a number of people suffer small. So I don't know if that's too harsh on the American people, but that seems to be the case, is that grocery prices was just kind of the number one issue.
Fair enough. Fabian Liberty, what are your initial impressions here?
Yeah, so obviously I wasn't like particularly pro Trump. I was anti Kamala, but I'm not like super stoked. You know, I mean, I hope he keeps all the promises he made to libertarians, which he almost will not keep, like almost certainly won't keep.
What
We'll
promises
see what
did he
happens.
make to libertarians?
Freeing Ross Ulbricht.
I'm sorry to...
Yeah,
I don't
no,
mean
it's
to
fine.
interrupt.
It's
No,
fine.
it's a
Well, dude,
conversation.
I'm
We're
not
gonna
super
free flow,
stressed.
yeah.
Go for it.
It seems like we're all healing. All right, we're healing. All right, let's just in the spirit of healing for the lefties here. Let's like freeing Ross. I think he probably will do that, but prompts put a libertarian in. We might get Thomas Massey as Secretary of Agriculture. We'll see. And there was other ones. I hate tariffs, and so and I don't trust him to use them intelligently. So because tariffs can be used as a tool to negotiate, free trade agreements and negotiate reduction in tariffs and et cetera, and, and get better trade in the long run. But I don't see Trump being good at that. I think he's just going to, but setting all that aside, like what happened, right? I think obviously, not to be like smug, it's obviously a ton of variables, right? I think, Biden stepping down and her not having a real campaign, like a traditional campaign and a longer campaign, is a problem, right? I think her unwillingness to be able to have genuine conversations and not so much scripted environment made her come off fake as hell. Whether she is or isn't, that's how she came off to everybody. And whether Trump is or isn't real, he came off as genuine by comparison. I think Trump ran a good campaign. I think he nailed it. You know, having Vivek on college campuses, having Tulsi Gabbard there to defend against Liz Cheney allegations, having JD Vance doing the hardball interviews. I think it's a very, very different campaign than 2016 and 2020, where he let his ego kind of run everything. He's a much better campaign of putting out the chessboard pieces into the places that they belonged. And ultimately, I think the other one is, you know, Kamala ran these like targeted identity politics positions, right? Here's what I'm doing for black men. Here's what I'm doing for this. And she was in an unenviable position in the left with the Israel-Palestine issue. And I think we don't know yet, but I think looking at like Florida, like looking at Dade County and Palm Beach and places that are high in Jews and seeing how those flipped massively, I think, and I want to combine that too with black men. I think black men looked at the economy, but also looked at immigration. I mean, you're seeing a lot of black American men feel left out by the left, as it is kind of anti-male, and black women go on all these podcasts kind of shitting on black men and blaming cultural decay on men specifically. And I think the polls have a much more difficult time figuring out whether or not someone's a likely voter than figuring out who they support. And I think low voter turnout that we're seeing so far in the black community means that a lot of black men told people, yeah, sure, I'll vote Kamala. And then on election day, they were like, I can't be bothered to vote for either of these people because they had nothing to vote for, or they were too conflicted. And obviously Latinos being, 45% white Latino men. So there's a lot of factors, but that's kind of my initial thoughts.
Okay. Lactoid, what are your initial thoughts? And then I'll give my spiel, but go ahead.
Yeah, so still a little bit hungover. So I wrote down my initial thoughts. So I guess here's where I'm at. I think that from the very start, the whole primary process thing was fudged. They should have known by February from the Her report that there was issues, but they saw that as a partisan challenge as opposed to a warning as to, hey, maybe we should be actually looking more into this and have a full primary. But unfortunately, they didn't do that, right? You saw Congress attack Robert Hur unjustly. I mean, even people like Pisco were coming out and saying that was ridiculous. I mean, Congress was wrong about that. They just saw it as a partisan thing, and they just couldn't get over the idea that maybe Biden had some real issues, which obviously he did. They only fully accepted that in July, and that's when the party heads like Obama and Nancy Pelosi actually did anything to pressure Biden to step down, when in reality, there should have been a pressure to at least have a primary, like a full primary process, way earlier, at least in February. Probably earlier than that, but I'm going to be as charitable as possible and say by the time of the Her report, it should have been absolutely clear. I think the DNC, the Democratic platform, had a lot of issues when it came to credibility. They were sort of running on the "we are the credible ones" and Donald Trump's the liar. However, there was a couple, in my opinion, high-profile falsehoods that were being repeated, such as the lies about Project 2025, the Very Fine People, bloodbath, the abortion stance coming from the Republicans, and also the abortion stance from the Democrats, right? And while I understand that people might not think that's a big deal, it is a big deal when you're trying to sell yourself as the authentic alternative to Donald Trump, when in reality you come across as incredibly inauthentic. And authenticity was a major part of Kamala's weaknesses all throughout the campaign. Every time she talked, it just seemed like she was trying to inauthentically pander to a specific voting demographics, as opposed to actually speak her mind. This was confounded upon by the fact that she didn't go on Joe Rogan, but that she did go on some kind of like cheap SNL skits, which I think actually did her a disservice. I think she's probably kicking herself now about not going on Joe Rogan and actually trying to have a full conversation. But I don't know if she'd be able to, frankly. So maybe it is a good idea that she didn't do it. But at that point, that's just a weakness with the candidate, which again goes back to my first point. Two more quick points.
Quickly,
I think DEI and the culture war are still issues, and big government skepticism is still real. I think those were big parts of this election, which I think is what motivated a lot of Trump support. And then finally, I mean, I think there was indicators beforehand. The betting markets, I trusted them. I was right. And
Trump was polling well, and Trump outperforms polls, and we saw that happen again here. So, I mean, everything I think was, this is why I had it for Trump. Frankly, I probably should have given it more for Trump. I have been repeatedly saying it's going to be like a super, super thin margin, one state difference. This is a sweep, right? He's going to win the Electoral College, the popular vote, the Senate, probably the House.
And the whole blue wall.
Yeah, and the whole blue wall. Like it could not have been a better night for him. So yeah, I mean, there's some major issues with the Democratic Party.
I do want to we'll get Econoboy in here in a second once he gets his stuff together. But I'll give my spiel while he's getting his stuff together, okay? I think people need to look at this. I'm going to share my screen, right? I think people need to watch this. I think people need to internalize this. One of the things that I've been seeing happening is a lot of soft kind of like, well, look at America and how bad America is, right? I need you guys to watch this, and dear viewers at home, I want you to really look at this. I really want you to take this to heart, because this is probably the most damning thing I have seen in electoral politics.
So you asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
So
literally nothing. I need you guys to understand how bad that is. Literally nothing. In no metric, with no group, in no area, did Kamala do well. She just didn't. So we have to take a look at that cold, hard fact and do some reevaluating. The things that Kamala Harris was being praised for in her campaign, she's running such a great campaign, she's doing so well, obviously did not line up with reality, right? A lot of people deluded themselves into thinking she was doing the smart thing, or she was doing the right thing or the correct thing. That obviously is false. What we have to do today and over the coming weeks is take a good, hard look at where these failures were. Why is it that Latino men, who Trump has made all sorts of comments about, trusted Trump and felt like Trump was a better option than the Democrats? Because if you think, and I tend to agree, that Trump is kind of racist, you have to reckon with the fact that the average Latino voter thought that the Democrats were worse than that. We can't pull the wool over our eyes here and just say, well, no, America's racist. That's not going to fly. We're not going to win anything ever if we have that take. So today what I wanted to talk about is why. Why is it that this was such a monumental, colossal failure? What could we have done differently? And what can we do going forward to fix this problem? The just broken trust that the electorate has in the Democratic Party. But that's my that's my spiel. I want to give it to Econoboy. Let him, what the hell happened to Econoboy, in your opinion, right? Give you the chance to share your piece.
Number one, I gotta say, I was just plain wrong. Okay, I gotta say I was just plain wrong. I think, I think that a lot of what I said about demographic transformation, I mean, those things are true. And I think that when you look at, for instance, Kamala does better than Kamala does better than Biden when it comes to older people. And she, I think she does about the same when it comes to younger people. The group that she really loses out on the age demographics is Gen Xers, basically, people from 45 to 64. She takes a complete dump this election in that group. And I think in part it points to the inflation narrative being particularly correct here, where those are people in their prime earning years, right? These are people that are very disproportionately likely to be members of the workforce, and people who, you could say, particularly are impacted directly by inflation. Older people are on fixed incomes, younger people are more likely to be students or dependents. And so I think that that's a big part of it as well. And I do maintain that, look, I mean, to the extent that we might quibble on the degree to which this is correct, sure. But I do think that a more progressive and positive platform would have helped here. Latinos specifically respond better to more populist platforms. I mean, for instance, in 2020, Bernie actually did incredibly well when it came to Latino voters in that primary. You can see a lot of border counties and counties where there are big shifts between from Clinton to Biden to Kamala on Hispanic voters. And I think that a more populist platform does actually help here. People are not very economically informed, right? And so the last thing that I'll say is that I don't think like the center left liberals who are like, we need to just run on like the wonkiest tax reform. That just clearly even if that's good policy, which I don't necessarily agree, that just clearly doesn't work, right? Like you have to run on what I would imagine to be like populist economic messaging that is both good for people and also gets people kind of excited to come out and vote. The last thing I'll say, 13 million people that voted for Biden didn't vote this election at all, right? Trump literally got 84% of people who voted for Trump in 2020 came back and voted for him again. That number was 77% for Biden voters. Like, we just had a huge portion of the base that just, like, didn't give enough of a fuck to come out and vote.
So, I'm just looking at this, right, because you said something that I was like, oh, is this true? No, even among 65 or older voters, Biden did better in 2020 than Harris did.
That's not the polling I have.
I could be wrong, right?
I'm just looking at CNN exits. CNN exit has Biden at 47% with 65 and older, and 2024 Harris is at 49.
Okay, again,
So-
maybe my data is incorrect.
That's not
here, right?
I think
look, that's not his fault because Biden had a lot of dead voters. You know what I mean? Like you gotta factor that in.
But fair
I
enough.
also think we
Go
got to
ahead.
be careful when we're talking about like, oh, there's so many less voters for Kamala or even less voters for Trump or something. I believe, and unless I'm incorrect, there's a lot of votes still haven't been counted yet. So right now, Trump's at 72 million. In 2020, he was at 74 million, and half of California still has to be counted. And
Right, but
a
they
number of other
still know
states.
roughly how many votes are left to count, right?
Yeah, they
we're talking about total
do.
vote count.
Right, but they don't have the total vote count for Trump yet or Harris yet.
Right, but true, and they could swing one way or the other. I agree with you. I just mean, but they do have total vote count between the two candidates in comparison.
I'm
well,
also
they know like with like the percentage of popular vote between the two candidates right now,
right.
and they can project that Trump's going to win the popular vote. But I don't believe that if Trump is sitting at 72 million right now, and half of California has yet to be counted, and Trump has almost 4 million there already. I mean, another 4 million, and he's already blown past his 2020 results in terms of just straight numeric votes.
Right. What I'm saying, but we have we know. Never mind. It's nitpicky.
Right. I'm just saying that, like, I think Trump's going to outperform 2020 in terms of raw numbers of votes. I think that a lot of this election, because third parties didn't do that well in comparison to prior elections, I think this is very much people choosing Donald Trump over Kamala Harris.
That is something I wanted to piggyback on. Right, choosing Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. Because Wick, and I'm not trying to pick on you or anything. I think we're all here in the spirit of learning, right? You had made this comment where you were like, well, I think Trump's racist. And I think that, Latinos, you alluded to the concept that most Latinos would agree that Trump is racist because of the comments that he made, but that Kamala was worse. And I don't think that's true for a majority here. What I think is actually true is that they voted for Trump. Like, I think so many people on the left have misviewed, especially with Latinos and immigration policy, that like they have played this game that like all of these comments are racist, and therefore there's like this simplistic idea of like Trump hates the brown people ought to vote with us if they have any sense, when really Trump really genuinely is a civic nationalist, someone that thinks that our border is importing socialists that are given tons of welfare and shipped into swing states and given, and the Democrats are begging for a pathway to citizenship. And I don't think he actually particularly cares, though he does show some signs and symptoms. I don't disagree with that, about like the color of their skin, so much as he cares about the fact that they are coming from rundown countries, not going through a legal process, and are given welfare and are going to be permanent Democrat voters that vote for policies that he thinks will be destructive towards
One
America.
of the
And I think a lot of Latinos agree.
one
Legitimately agree with that, think it's a problem, and voted for him
I
to
don't
save the country
disagree
from their
with
I
that
feel like we're
last bit. I don't disagree with the last bit, but what I'm trying to say here before I read my super chats and I'll let Staxiums go is I know there's going to be a temptation here, and I'm going to fall into it, and forgive me if I do, to have a policy debate, right? Which is fair, but we're not here for that. We're here to kind of do like a post-mortem, and regardless of whether we think it was wise that they voted the way they did or they should have voted the way they did, we got to look at why they voted the way they did and kind of
That's what I was
really go
explaining.
through it. Does that make sense?
Right.
But I just,
Yeah, no,
I'm
that's what I was
I'm just
explaining, is that-
reiterating to not just to you, right? But I'm telling everyone here, including myself,
Right, but that wasn't my
let's
point.
not argue about
Right, like
yeah.
no, that wasn't my point. But very quickly, just to rehash it. Like my point is that many people think that they have confused what Donald Trump is putting out as a policy, as a bad vibe with racist tendencies. And I think that there is a bias there from the left, and they have misunderstood it. And I think that is reflected in how many Latino men didn't see it that way. They saw it as saving their country and keeping it stable.
I feel like you're kind of talking out of the side of your mouth here when you're referring to Latino voters, because you're kind of saying that the Democratic Party is importing a bunch of voters so that they can vote for the party, but then also recognizing that Latino voters voted Republican this election.
What I said was, from the position of the average Latino male and from the rhetoric that is coming from the campaign, what was sold. I didn't give you any indication of what I individually believe, but rather that has been a tried and true messaging from the Trump campaign that we saw reiterated on Joe Rogan by both Trump and JD Vance leading up to the election.
And Elon Musk a lot.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk, all of them on Joe Rogan. I mean, the Trump interview was 45 million views on YouTube alone, right? So I think a lot of Latino men saw that.
You're not saying that,
and they're like,
okay. Sorry.
I mean, I think that some of that is true. I don't think of it as like a person behind the screen rubbing their hands. I think it's more a tendency of bad actions.
Both could be true, right? You could have a political side say, you know what, like this demographic benefits us. We want to get more in, or at least be more lax when it comes to restrictions, and then have that backfire, right? Or have like all of a sudden the prediction fails, right?
And then the one person on Joe Rogan that would have countered it was John Fetterman, and he admitted that Joe Rogan was right about the thing that I just said. He did stupidly or wrongly, but whatever. I think a lot of Latino men saw that.
I do want to read some super chats. I got to make a little money, gang. Okay. By the way, I'm no longer sponsored by anyone. Just FYI, right? No contracts or nothing. So here we are.
There's no more victory for progressive victory. Right?
$2 from Artemis Val. Well, hello there. $20 from Lawson Harrison. Wick, you are operating on the assumption that the average voter can even recognize a success versus a failure. $2 from Zephyr Hash. Wick, the package has been delivered. Put it on. I'll find it if I can. $5 from Zephyr Hash. At the end of the day, everything points to inflation and immigration. People think their jobs are in threat and costs are rising. Perception is reality. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because I think that's a kind of the elephant in the room here, right? We talk about rhetoric all day. We could talk about campaigns all day. But what if it's just true that the inflation high, we vote out the incumbent. Inflation low, we vote for the incumbent. What if it's just that simple? Like, what if we're overcomplicating this?
I had a professor who Delegate Kirk Cox in Colonial Heights, Virginia. He taught, I said professor, but he was my AP government teacher. And the first thing he did, obviously the first day of school, is he pulled out his wallet And then he slammed his wallet on the table and he said, there you go. That's how 80% of Americans vote, right?
Sure,
when
but
times are good economically, they vote for who's in power. And when times are bad economically, they vote for the person that says they're going to fix it.
Sure, but I will say that it's a little bit more of a complicated picture, though. As Will Stansel
Yeah,
always
of
calls
course.
it was a little bit of a vibe session, right? That like wages outperformed inflation, and people were very capable of keeping up with the higher prices, but it still felt like people were losing money for reasons that I don't know if I fully understand. That it was probably due to the media environment. That it was
This is
probably
not true. Because
What
everybody knows
about
it's
what I was
not
just saying
true
not
and
true?
that they're
What was I saying
struggling
not
with
true?
their bills.
Okay, so this is what I'm trying to refer to right now. Where point to any specific point, like what data? Like I feel like I said wage growth was
Right, like I
out.
agree. No, I
Okay.
agree that like this. What my problem is that like for example, like the data collection doesn't actually collect everything, and so like let's look at it right. Like
Right.
when we look at the CPI and
Let's
things
look at
like
some
that,
anecdotes.
like it's not an anecdote. I'm gonna give you some
ahead.
examples of how the CPI doesn't accurately measure
We're
inflation.
doing are we
right?
doing
So-
the debate thing?
so-
right? Are we doing the debate thing on the policy? Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just be very quick. I think it's not just vibes that aren't true. I think what is true is that families go to the grocery store and you say, oh, well, for the average family across the board, it'll even out that wages went up. But they're going to the grocery store
Hold
and
on.
they're seeing
Yo, you cannot use
different products.
slurs. You cannot use slurs in my chat. Hold on. I'm pretty free speechy, but my monetization is important to me.
Fair enough.
Don't do that again. Continue.
Well, I'm just saying, like people are seeing their food ingredients change.
But
People
I
are
don't-
seeing the quality of their food change, and then there is this factor where I think a lot of people, especially middle class, are being more health conscious, and they know that the food isn't the same food that they ate 20 years ago, and so they're having to buy more expensive, healthier food, and they're even if their grocery bill, right, purely based off of inflation from comparing like things like Kraft mac and cheese to Kraft mac and cheese, they realize that like, well, Kraft mac and cheese has yellow dye in it. And I need to buy the Annie's organic mac and cheese for my kids because like that's the only shit that doesn't have the yellow dye in it. And that shit's like twice the price of Kraft mac
Okay,
and
but
cheese.
I feel like
so
we-
their actual grocery bills that they're paying are going up even in a way that isn't necessarily measured by
I wasn't
things like
I
the
wasn't
CPI.
de-
To
I
the
wasn't
greatest
denying with
degree.
that, and I don't know how that wouldn't be factored in the CPI. But I think the main thing that I'm
It's
referring
impossible
to.
to calculate.
Oh, like you're saying the fact that someone wants to have a more health conscious lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
That's a form of inflation. That's also a form of progressing from the
That's
lower
not
to
what
the
I
middle
said.
class. Is being
That's not what
able
I
to
said at
do-
all.
Okay, yeah, I thought that's what you were saying. So I just
Okay,
correct
so
me.
if you
No,
believe,
I'm
hold on,
saying the
stop. I
grocery
want
bills are going up because they
to
have to make
shortcut
different
this
choices.
because we're getting
Inflation was
stuck in the thing
happening.
I didn't want to get stuck on. Staxioms. Okay,
Yes.
and this is to Staxioms and Econoboy. Okay, so regardless of whether it's true or not, people believe the economy was bad, and frankly, Kamala's messaging on the economy failed to convince the voter.
Mhm.
What could she have done differently to convince the voter?
I mean, I think that so it's true that there's more people in 2024 who will say that their financial situation got worse than 2020. Like that's undoubtedly true. And it's also undoubtedly true that Trump does a lot better, obviously, with the people who say that their financial situation got worse. But again, what we have to keep in mind is part of that is compositional. The fact that turnout is so much lower on the Democratic side relative to the Republican side, right? Like of the people, this is a poll of people who voted, right? So of the people who voted, a much larger percentage of them will say that their financial situation is worse. Now, in part, that could be people whose financial situation is worse are just more likely to vote than people who say the opposite. Like that's probably true. And so that's not a good thing for Democrats, which paints a picture almost like what Wick's point is, which is, to some extent, like inflation's killed incumbent governments just across the world.
Yeah.
Like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada's coming up. Like Modi's government does terribly, even though it's a historically popular government. Japan's ruling party lost their majority for the first time in like 40 years. And that's in a country that doesn't even have that high a level of inflation, right? Like it's clear that inflation it's really just fucking hard to win re-election if inflation is high. And I've always said that the behavioral effects of inflation are there, like they're sticky, they're apparent. It's just you wouldn't have imagined that it would have I wouldn't have imagined it would have had such a big impact, because I thought Democrats would still be inspired to go out and vote. So the only thing in my view that the Democrats could have done is to give themselves the best chance of winning in this election. It's hard to say that they still would have won, but optimally, the Democrats should have run on a progressive platform of populist messaging, expansion of government services and the welfare state and things like that. And that's at least a progressive message that would stick on to people's financial troubles a lot better than like this incredibly skinny, narrow platform that Kamala went with. Again, like Bernie Sanders does better with Hispanics in the 2020 primary than like every other Democrat. He runs on the most populist platform. People are saying, oh, it's because Kamala lost Hispanic voters. In some regards, that's true. It's not only just one thing, but I think a more populist platform helps significantly in this regard.
Fair enough.
That's
Go
sorry,
ahead.
just to be clear, what kind of like, because one of the main things that Kamala was running on was like the expansion of the child tax credit. Like that was like front and center of almost all of the
Yeah, but that was
um,
Trump's position. So
Most
like
people who
she didn't
vote
really own it.
Most people who vote aren't parents, right? And so again, I think that the things that you probably are going to want to run on is just like these more expansive, like, okay,
like for
Kamala's
example, that's what I'm
healthcare,
asking. Yeah.
yeah, like Kamala's healthcare plan was like insanely narrow. We're going to expand Medicare to cover home care. Who gives a shit?
Hmm.
Nobody gives a shit about that policy. It does help some people, and it's not a bad policy, but like run on a public option that everyone can actually take out of, right? Like, be more forceful about. She brought up the minimum wage 2 weeks ago. Like, we're months into a campaign. She talked about legalizing marijuana yesterday. Like, the day of the election is when she mentioned we should legalize marijuana. Like, how are we not, Tim Walz had to be reeled back in because he said he wanted to get rid of the Electoral College, which, by the way, didn't matter in this election. Like, how are you reeling that in? That's just way too milquetoast of a platform to inspire, again, the 13 million Democrats who sat this election out. Way too milquetoast of a platform.
I also think, just to add to that, I don't disagree with anything that he was saying, but also the sense of urgency I think that a lot of Democratic voters had during 2016 and 2020. 2016 mostly because we were new to the idea of Donald Trump, and 2020 because we had lived it. This, it kind of feels a little bit more amorphous, the kind of threat of Donald Trump. So I feel like it's possible that Democratic voters just weren't motivated or urgent enough to vote him out of the White House.
So
I want to propose a question
if I go ahead.
Well,
Well,
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, it's
Say
fine.
what you
Give
know
me
what I mean?
what you got.
Well, no, it's just one of the things that I've noticed, and this is like, again, like this is, I'm not like strong in this position. I'm just curious what you guys think about it. At least on the right, is like Gen X seems like they have been in terms of the culture war a sleeping giant. Like I have noticed so many more Gen X people that were asleep in 2008 when millennials were like pissed, right? Like we were like when we tried to get jobs and the economy collapsed because of the 1% or however you want to occupy Wall Street, right? We have been fairly engaged, and I have seen like a lot of Gen Xers that were very boring. They were engaged, but it was just like my wallet, whatever the taxes are, simple shit. And the culture war seems to have brought Gen X like back. Like I have seen so many Gen Xers come in and be like, the adults are here. We're going to do it. And I'm like, hey, sit down, calm down. You have no idea what the fuck you're doing because you haven't been paying attention to politics for 20 years. And we're happy you're here, but you're going to have to listen to the generation under you because we've been fighting this for 20 years. I don't know if it's per se as true on the left, but I mean like things like, libs of TikTok, right? Like that wasn't a millennial Zoomer fucking thing. That was like Gen X parents and like people
Cat
coming
turd.
in being like, what the fuck are they? Right. Like people like cat turd, right? Like, what the fuck are they doing to the kids? Right. And so like, I wonder how much of that has like had an effect on the election.
That is actually kind of to piggyback off that. My question I had in mind was that we do see a lot of these exit polls, a lot of exit interviews, a lot of I grant you some of it's anecdotal, but a lot of people saying, you know what? I voted for Biden. in 2020, I voted for Clinton in 2016, but I voted for Trump in 2024 because Democrats make me feel like the enemy, right? Democrats make me feel like the bad guy. Do we think that had any serious impact at all?
No.
Yes.
No, I
No.
think
Of
it's
course.
negligible.
It had zero impact. It had literally no noticeable impact, I don't think. I just don't think that the story of this
None?
election has.
Not
If you
one?
ask people what issues they voted on, they're not saying transing the kids
Right.
or
It's
because they called
inflation
me
and
racist.
immigration.
It's
It's those two.
like, again, like, let's, like, okay, 90, I'm looking at an Excel right now. 95% of the reasons people voted were democracy, immigration, the economy, abortion, and foreign policy. That was 95% of the reasons people voted. One of the polls that was crazily wrong in this election, like 20 points wrong this election,
Selzer.
was no, not Selzer. When people
Which was also
polled
very
who
wrong.
they
Also Seltzer.
well,
Fucking
Yeah.
Iowa.
no, the poll that was crazy. If we had known this poll, I would say Trump would have won. The poll of who people view as the change candidate was wildly wrong. I'm looking at it right now. Of the people who said bringing change was important to them, 74% say they voted for Donald Trump 74% of the time, right? Like, we had polls that said Kamala was the change candidate, 48 to 45. Like, it was so incorrect, it seemed like. And so,
The change from what?
well, yeah, I think a
From
change from the
herself.
incumbent
Yeah,
administration that,
From the
well, a
status
change
quo.
from the, yeah, a change from the status quo where people had to deal with a lot of inflation. Like, Wick, there's literally no evidence that we can point to that a significant reason why 13 million Biden voters sat out was, the messaging of the Democrats was too socially progressive. There's no way that we can make that claim. 13 million Biden voters are not like afraid of going too woke by voting for Kamala Harris. It's because they don't view her platform as tantalizing enough to actually go out and positively
no.
vote for
I
her.
Can I
mean, I
disagree with
have.
this?
No.
Hold on, I have anecdotal
Hold on.
evidence. I understand it's not a study, okay, but I have people in my life who voted for Biden in 2020 who did not go to the polls or who voted for Trump because they were tired of being called racist. They were tired of watching them say nothing about the college protest campus, watching people say nothing when white people are denigrated or men are denigrated. So no, it's not a study I could point to. Now again, I don't know if that's caught like that was enough to flip, right? But when you combine that with the inflation, a lot of people just were like, nah, fuck it. I'm staying home.
Yeah,
Let
but I
me
think
just
people on
say
my
this,
show
like,
about this. But I gotta check something real quick. You guys go. Someone, I guess,
Just
someone bought me
very
a
quick,
hoodie,
like
and I'm looking for it.
I find this so weird that I'm already seeing so many people, and I'm seeing it on this panel too, right? Like where today, especially today, not the next 2 years or the next 4 years, today is kind of a day for the left to shut up and listen to the right and figure out what they got wrong. Like the hubris of like, I have this data and we're right on this. Like the people that ran on vibes are just immediately discounting the very vibes that the right are trying to tell you what it is that they felt within their echo chambers,
Okay.
within their group of people,
True.
within their community.
Here's-
and it's like, actually, I've got this polling data
Fabian,
that was wrong.
Fabian is
and
wildly
I've got some new
misunderstanding my
polling
point.
Here,
data.
this
Like,
is
it's like,
complete
come on,
bullshit.
dude.
That
Nah,
doesn't mean
Scott's
anything
right.
because you guys voted for Trump the last 2 times.
I
he
didn't
ran
vote for
office
Trump.
Too.
I didn't.
I didn't
You
vote
weren't
for
even
Trump.
fucking in America, but like you're.
I
the
was in
right-
America.
What do
Whoa,
you mean?
whoa, whoa! I voted for
are
Gary
you
Johnson
talking
in
about?
2016 and Joe Jorgensen in 2020.
Okay.
I voted
Third
for
party.
Donald Trump in 2016. I voted third party in 2020, and I voted for John Galt for president. The only Republican
Okay,
I voted
I
for
think-
was Hung Kao.
I think the people we're
Because fuck Tim
referring
Kaine.
to that genuinely matter are the Democrats who didn't show up in the election or Democrats that swapped to Republican. But I think that when you're like, oh, just listen to us, and it's people who lost in 2020 and 2016, I don't know why we should listen to your group of people when you didn't sway the election any one way.
I'm
that make
talking
sense?
about I'm talking about the fact that left wing spaces People do not feel comfortable speaking their true opinions in left-wing spaces. If you want people's honest, raw opinions, you're not going to get it from the media, and you're not going to get it from left-wing echo chambers. You have to talk to right-wing people, where these people go, I didn't leave the left left me, and then they come and talk to us. They say their genuine opinions. They don't say it in left-wing discords or on left-wing spaces or at the office place, because they're afraid of being judged, and they're afraid of being attacked, and they're afraid of being marginalized in different ways. And you guys are just dismissing it because you have like exit polls.
No, by the way, your polls
not
were
going to
wrong.
capture everything. Listen, you guys were wrong. Listen to the right for one fucking day.
Fabian is wildly misunderstanding our point. He's going on a soapbox. Like you're misunderstanding my point entirely, right? So I'm not saying that in the stack rank of all the issues people said they cared about, that they're not going to say, oh, the wokeness is annoying and I don't like the wokeness. My point is that if you look at the actual composition of this electorate, what happened in this election was not a bunch of Democrats saying, I'm going to vote for Trump. Now, to be fair, you could make the argument that, oh, like, of the 13 million Biden voters that decided not to vote for Kamala, it was because of, woke policies and like woke rhetoric and things like this, right? I find this like to be a very dissatisfying argument, because I think that you could argue in many regards from a social policy perspective, the Democrats, and this is what people talked about coming out of 2020, oh, this was why the election was so close. Oh, they're going to defund the police. Trans issues are becoming a big deal. CRT is a big deal. Like, these were major election and talking points in 2020. Democrats end up winning that election. And Biden ends up getting a much higher percentage of Clinton voters and a much higher percentage of Clinton voters coming back than Kamala does in 2024, when Kamala ran on a messaging campaign of like very much not emphasizing the fact she would be the first female president, very much not emphasizing the fact that the historical nature of her presidency as a woman of color and a biracial woman, very much not emphasizing the fact that Donald Trump is a racist and Donald Trump is like, you didn't
call him a fascist.
You think people aren't motivated a little bit to vote for the first female president?
Well, I think it's funny to make the claim that those things weren't waterboarded to America over and over.
When you ask people, obviously, well, Kamala, the Democrats, in some regards, like, they can't control like what media pundits and people in alternative media spaces say.
They pay those fucking media pundits.
No,
Fabian,
I don't. I didn't. Okay, I've been. Hold on. I've been Hassaning
TikTok videos that go viral.
I've been Hassaning my own panel while I got this brand new hoodie. Thank you, Zephyr Hash, for the hoodie. Zephyr Hash bought me this hoodie. It's a great hoodie, but this idea, right? This is something that Bill Maher and others like him have been calling on Kamala to do for months now. Have a Sister Soldier moment. She never did. She needed a Sister Soldier moment. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, let me refer to you. It was a incident in the Clinton campaign. I'm talking the 90s, right? When he was running for office. Sister Soldier was a not super popular figure, but she was considered kind of like an extremist on the left side, like things like that. Clinton publicly excoriated her, publicly, right, went after her, right? And it was considered a win. It was considered a win. And it made people more comfortable talking, right? More comfortable being like, I can support this guy because he's willing to stand up to the extremists on his own side. Right, and it made people more comfortable.
Biden did the opposite, and he won in 2020. Biden embraced
Lex
progressives.
Friedman for $20. Okay, Lex Friedman for $20 says the left attacked left-leaning people to an insane degree. It was exhausting and unwelcoming. That too, right?
Yeah, but that happened in 2020 too. Like, again, like Biden, he runs in 2020, embracing progressives, saying, talking about appointing progressives. He does actually appoint progressives. He runs on a progressive platform, especially relative to Kamala, on social issues too.
Hold on. Biden ran as a moderate. Biden ran as a moderate. One of the reasons he was elected to the primary in 2020 was because he was seen to stand up against extremists of his side.
Far more moderate than Kamala Harris in 2019.
Wick, are you actually making the claim that Kamala's platform was more progressive than Biden's?
No. What I'm making
yes,
the claim
2019.
My claim is that people saw Kamala as much more extreme than Biden.
Okay, so
that's a failure on Kamala's part of it's just a failure of a campaign, right? If you believe, Boy, if you believe that she was not as progressive as Biden was, that's fair, right? But then you have to ask yourself, why is it that she failed to communicate that to the public?
Okay, so right. So I have to ask you,
Please.
right? So if we would agree, oh, it's actually the case that no, like it's actually the case that Kamala ran on a less progressive platform in 2020 or in 2024 than they did in 2020, which you've agreed with. It's so clearly the case that that is true, right? But you're also saying, well, people viewed her as more extreme. I can tell you that most people said Trump was more extreme than Kamala, right? Just based on the polling that I'm seeing here, right? This is an exit poll. Exit polls are typically very reliable, right?
That's
Because they're huge
a
sample
false
sizes.
comparison.
But hold on,
That's
Fabian,
not
one
the
second.
point.
Hold on, let Econoboy
her
finish.
in the
You gotta
left-wing
let
space.
you gotta let Econo
not
finish.
against Trump.
You gotta let Econo finish. Let's hear his point out. Let's hear him, and then you can go. Econoboy, you have the
Right.
floor, please.
So what we have to argue then, we have to somehow make the claim that Biden wins on a more progressive platform, but people think he's more moderate. Okay, interesting. Like, I don't know what Kamala's supposed to do about that other than run on an even more moderate campaign. Like, I don't know how she does that. And then on the other hand, we have to argue that the people who sit out the election are doing so not because of the fact that Kamala runs on a milquetoast platform, but in fact because they just think she's more extreme. Like, what do you
She
do?
ran on an unrealized gains on a capital gains tax to act like she is this milquetoast neoliberal that isn't bringing forth left-wing socialist policies as a major part of her platform.
Fabian,
is like,
you guys are wild.
I'm
for saying
listening.
this.
No,
I'm wild for saying she ran on something that was literally on her
Yeah,
fucking
there's-
website that said I'm running on.
Look
Like,
at the
you
idea
are-
that people view the
You're like,
unrealized
the
capital
left
gain.
didn't go left enough, and it's
No,
like, what are you talking about?
The idea that average
My brother in
people are going to
Christ,
sit
like,
there.
we need
The
to
idea-
double down on the things that made her lose. Like,
Okay, if that okay,
You're pointing out unrealized tax gains instead of like the public option that Biden proposed, or like decriminalizing weed, which he talked about way more ad infinitum than Kamala did.
forgiving student loan debt. I mean, like, there's
Yeah,
a ton of
that's a-
stuff
that's a
like,
huge
on the
Hold on.
progressive.
Hold on, but Kamala isn't in a vacuum. One of the things that was very effective that the Trump campaign did, right? We just got to acknowledge reality here. The Trump was able to tie her to her statements in the 2019 and the 2020 primaries, right? And a lot of the much more extreme rhetoric that she ran on then. Then she tried to moderate. She tried to walk that back, but it's just clear that the electorate did not trust her.
I
right?
don't think that anyone
that.
remembers Kamala for the 2020 primary, like the statements that she made on a debate stage. Rather, she's the vice president and she's the person who campaigned over the last year. Like, I don't think
people
that
are
this sticks so
simplistic enough
much.
to no, they absolutely
Remember what?
her as someone.
What
they
did
remember
what
her
did she
saying
say
that
in the 2020 primary that stuck in everyone's mind?
What she said.
A lot of
one
that was
things
their first
stuck-
impression.
One of the
Their
things
first
that
impression,
stuck
yeah.
was her saying that she absolutely supported mandatory gun buyback programs, and a lot of fucking people that love their guns in America heard that and were like, what about it? And she was like, actually I own a gun because I'm a cop. And what kind of gun is it? Glock. Anyways, next question.
Her healthcare
And they were
proposal,
like,
her
"Fuck you,
healthcare
bitch."
proposal was also more progressive. Just to be
but
clear.
here's the problem. When you ask these people what they feel about, none of them say the Second Amendment. None of them say that that's the motivating force for why they voted for Trump.
Oh, wait. Can I? This is okay. First of all, the idea that Kamala Harris was less progressive than Joe Biden in 2019, I think, is ridiculous. She had a more progressive healthcare policy. She was far more progressive when it came to gun control.
She ran on open borders.
She like on every single issue. I recall like her government spending proposals like made Biden's look like a drop in the bucket, right?
She ran on open borders,
and GovTrack put her as the most progressive senator. GovTrack put her as the most progressive senator in 2019. I think it's complete historical revisionism to say that she wasn't this left-wing progressive in 2019. Now, I agree that going into 2024, she wasn't as vocal about a lot of that. But another thing, kind of tying this back into the culture war conversation, another position that she held in 2019 was trans surgeries for detained migrants, right? And Trump said this during the debate stage, and like, oh, people thought it was crazy, and then it turned out to be real, and now this is in every fucking Trump ad, or at least like fucking a quarter of them at least that I'm seeing. And so, and the reason for this is, yeah, I understand that like the culture issues are not the only issue, and I think there's like specific issues that people feel very strongly about, but I think the culture war does create a sort of vibe of hostility that people feel, where it's like, this person does not stand for me, this
It's
person
about
dislikes
trust.
me, this person wants me to feel I don't trust this person.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
trust this person to look out for my interests.
It's
right?
trust.
And she can't walk back the transgender surgeries from illegal migrants because she's going to alienate the transgender vote and the highly progressive vote. Again, like 2019, her proposals were far more progressive than Joe Biden, and she got clobbered in the primaries. She got absolutely destroyed because, again, the problem is not that she wasn't left enough; is that she wasn't authentic enough.
Biden.
I would say she wasn't
doesn't-
familiar enough.
No,
Biden does
let's
not
hear from
run-
Icon Boy. Go ahead.
Biden doesn't run the most centrist campaign, even in the Democratic primary in 2020, right? People like John Delaney ran. No, okay, listen, Lactoid, just give me a second here, okay? We're comparing general election campaigns. Biden ran on a substantially more progressive platform in the general election than Hillary Clinton did. What do we see? What are the results? He does do worse with Republicans who voted in that election than Hillary did, but he ends up winning. Why? Because a lot more people voted, and of the people who voted, of the Democrats who voted, he ends up getting a higher percentage of his own base voting for him. There was less party crossover. Right, you could say, oh, there's a confluence of factors. I'm not trying to boil it down to one thing. We might say, oh, in some regards, Kamala was destined to lose this because of inflation. Maybe in some regards, Trump was destined to lose in 2020 because of COVID. Like, obviously, that doesn't hurt the Democrats, but we're trying to talk about all else equal, like what would have led to a more, getting more votes, basically, is what we're talking about. And all else equal, I'm looking at the results of this election. I'm seeing 13 million Biden voters just not vote. I'm seeing the electorate be disproportionately old, whereas in 2020 it was disproportionately younger compared to this electorate. And that's a very clean story of like, oh, Democrats just were not inspired to come out and vote. And when you ask people why they voted, they don't say like it's such a lack of touch and grasp position. People aren't not voting for Democrats.
Oh my God! I really want to win an election in the future, so we cannot let this be the takeaway.
Wait, you're wrong.
We just need to go progressive.
No, it's not. It's very simple. It's way simpler than that.
Destroy us.
It was.
You're
it was
so wrong.
way. Hold on. It's way.
You should listen to them on how to win elections. I agree.
It's way simpler than that. Okay. 2020 is an outlier because it was retarded easy to vote. And that's why young people were there more, because it was retarded easy to vote. Young voters historically have had a problem with voter turnout. They're perfectly fine making TikToks about politics so that they can get likes, so that they can be on the right side of history. But when it comes to actually going to a voting poll and voting, there have been a lot more restrictions in a lot of states that got rid of mail-in ballots or made those more restrictive or didn't fortify the election, according to New York Times, in such a way. Like, yes, a lot of people voted in 2020 that didn't vote now, and that's because the voting process was different. So if you're going to use 2020 about it and talk about which age and demographics voted more, then your answer isn't we need to double down on progressivism. Your answer is we need to force more ballots that can come across at 4 o'clock in the morning.
I do need to make a little money, so I need to read some of these super chats. Apologies. $5 from Trib1. Kamala had a better shot by defaming Trump instead of talking to leftists. This is a loss by Garland. Will the right stay MAGA post-Trump? I say yes. $2 from Zephyr Hash to say, imagine this is aggressive catcalling at Wick. Well, thank you, sir. $2 from Artemis Fowl. When do I get my moment, Wick? I'll bring you in near to the end. Don't worry. I know you want your moment. $5 from Cameraman 502, who honestly believed Harris believed her own rhetoric and was actually moderate. More likely, she was still one of the most progressive and just lying. It was a trust issue. $5 from Audacity. It has nothing to do with the extremism of her progressive values. It has to do with her campaign was actively attacking men in the electorate. $5 from the Trib one. Trump can lie without worrying about his base fact-checking. He can commit a coup, say the election was rigged, lie on Haitians, and still get votes. $10 to Feder Methodist. The two on the left won't listen to the right-leaning libertarians, and you? Will they listen to a lifelong Dem that says all of you are correct and they are tone-deaf and condescending? And then $50. I forgot that America's memories only start when the general election starts. I find it hilarious that lefty socialists are telling people who is or is not moderate while accusing Trump of being Giga Hitler who just won the popular vote. And then finally, $5. To be clear, though I don't dislike what Kind of Boy is saying, I just think the progressive route would hurt our centrist voters. A wash, in my opinion. And then $10 more, again, from Lawson Harrison. He typed it out. Let me get back to it. Oh no, it's the Lawson Harrison. Please just DM me it so I can actually read it. The chat scrolled it down, and I'll read it later. But sorry about that. I guess to get it back to you guys, to you, my dear audience members, and also to you, my dear panelists. Like, again, I don't know. I can't tell. It's too early. It's too early. We need to go through the data more. The votes haven't all been counted yet, right? So I'm just giving you my gut here, my instinct, my intuition, but it is based on some data, right? Is that there were plenty of people who otherwise would have gone to the polls, but who decided to sit this one out because they could not tell that they couldn't see a distinction between the Trump and Kamala. And that was because, in a large way, that they saw both as liars. We can like it or not, that's what they saw. When you got Pisco, when you got Pisco and people like that lying about Liz Cheney's statements, they're like, well, fuck. Well, I mean, they're both lying. And I think that's silly. I voted for Harris, obviously. But this is a lot of the calculations they made. Go ahead. Staxiums, please.
Sorry, what comments about Liz Cheney?
Okay. Trump made a statement.
Wick is just taking a shot at Pisco for their Twitter.
I'm going to.
It was a lie for sure.
I'm going to continue to do so.
It's just a lie in a sea of lies from
I'm
the
going to
left
shortcut
and
this
the
just
right.
a little bit.
It's the most recent example I can think of.
I don't believe that anyone has ever heard of this story and wasn't already a committed voter either way. Does that make sense? Like the amount of political capital that you have to be invested in order to hear whatever this story is. That's my call, but
that's not true. Like, I think one of the hold on. I think one of the big stories that we're going to take out of this is we could put to bed the myth that what nobody say on the internet doesn't matter. I think it does matter, and it did affect the electorate.
No, I actually kind of agree with you to a certain extent. I don't think anybody that heard the Liz Cheney thing or the media's reaction changed their opinion. But I do think there was probably some people's opinions who had changed when Tulsi Gabbard got back out there and reminded people that Trump in this administration is avidly anti-war. I think some portion of it, when we talk about foreign policy, some portion of the people that voted were single issue voters, like white women and black women that were voting pro-abortion. But I think there were also single issue voters that are looking at Ukraine, that are looking at Israel and Palestine. And they're not looking at it because they love Israel or that they love Palestine. They're looking at it because they're sick of they're tying it to the economy, right? And even though the money we spend on these foreign wars is kind of a drop in the bucket compared to Social Security or all of these other government programs, they hear Trump they hear Kamala praise the immigration bill, then they hear a Republican go, "You mean the bill that had twice as much funding for the Ukraine war than it did for the border? That's the border bill you're talking about?" And then they see Tulsi Gabbard come out there and fire the one time they watch Fox News or MSNBC when she responds and remind them, yeah, we're the ones that want America first. We're the ones that want to fix our problems here instead of spending billions on war and death. So I do agree that the initial petty remarks weren't that effective, but I do think Trump's response this time around and being able to put Tulsi Gabbard forward and remind people that he's the candidate, presumably, that is anti-war, I think probably had a big impact. So maybe not big in the way that, massive, but we're talking about those little last minute things that change people, those few percentage points of a percentage. I think that
there's going to be a million marginal things like that where it could be true. I'm just looking at the data here, and it does say that of the 4% of people that prioritize foreign policy, the overwhelming majority vote for Trump. So I think it is one of those just like marginal things where I guess that message caught on a little bit better than Kamala's message. To be fair, I think that Kamala didn't really. I mean, to your point, maybe like I don't think Kamala had like a particularly. I just don't think she didn't speak to foreign policy almost at all in this campaign. Like, not that I can recall.
Well, I think she
I
was.
don't even know
I
what
think
her
she was in a.
policy is.
She was,
Do we think that was a mistake?
she's.
I
I don't think
like,
so.
Yeah,
I think-
probably.
I think
mean,
she
it's
couldn't.
marginal, but
I don't think it was a mistake of Kamala. I think it was a position that she was in with Israel Palestine and the left currently.
Yeah, that's a good
Like
point.
she was in a position where she had to choose between Jewish donors or left-wing socialists that are hard to get out to vote, but are a significant portion of the electorate that are pro-Palestine. The far left sees any support of Israel as supporting capitalism, as supporting Western hegemonic imperialism, as supporting the oppressors against the Palestinian people. And at the same time, she can't piss off every Jew by just coming out as a pro-Palestinian candidate. When they are a big portion of the donor class, and they are very important in Pennsylvania. And so what she ended up doing was kind of like a terrible decision, but kind of maybe the best one she had, which is run away from that question every single time she ever gave it and never gave an honest answer about it. And I think that harmed her in other ways. It was probably good for that single issue voter that she didn't have a strong stance one or the other way, but it was bad for people that were looking at her and going, you just look inauthentic. You don't ever give me a real answer. You don't ever give it to me straight. You're just bullshitting and we know it.
I think
But
there's
it's a-
something to be said about Democrats like towing the party line probably a bit too much and like not being very maverick in their policy prescriptions. I mean, I was saying months ago that I think there is probably room to run with a more progressive message on Israel and Palestine as a specific issue. Now, again, I think there's a confluence of factors that causes those 13 million Biden voters not to come out. I think that, having a more progressive message on Israel and Palestine is like but a marginal one of those things, which I think would be a net vote getter. But to Fabian's broader point, like one thing I've said about, and this is what sucks to see, especially in hindsight, about like the neutering of Tim Walz with regard to his progressive messaging, is that one thing that people do respond really well to with Trump is that, like, okay, for instance, and this is some evidence that I pointed to earlier, most people in this election viewed Trump as the more extreme candidate, right?
Mhm.
However, of the people who said both candidates are extreme, they overwhelmingly chose Trump's extremism. Like but when people said both of these candidates are extreme, they voted for Trump anyway. And so I think there's something
Right.
to be said about like, even if it's the case that we think progressive messaging, like people like Bernie Sanders, let's say, are not offering optimal policy or are, perhaps not right for certain portions of the electorate. At the very least, what we could say about running a guy like Bernie Sanders is, well, he definitely would score those points. Like he would be representative of like a genuine person with like real convictions. One thing people said about Bernie the entire time he was running is, and I think this is why you see a lot of Trump Bernie voters is, man, this guy's authentic. Like he's been saying the same shit for 40 years, right? And I
Yeah.
think there's something to be said about that.
I agree. But my problem with looking at data, and obviously I understand we're all kind of shooting from the hip here, waiting for more information, right? I'm not judging you for that. But my problem with some of the data on like this person's more extreme or that person's more extreme is it's difficult to parse out when they say Tim Walz is extreme. Do they mean Tim Walz is extreme because he's really progressive, or do they mean Tim Walz is extreme because he said live on TV that he believes that the free speech doesn't protect against misinformation and hate speech, right? Or vice versa with Trump. Are they saying Trump is extreme because he wants to radically lower taxes and implement tariffs as a new tax policy, or because he wants to drain the swamp and he wants to, release the JFK files, et cetera, et cetera? Or are they saying that because of like January 6th or like, bloodbath comments, which obviously is a hoax, but whatever. It's like, it's hard to tell what they mean in that regard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Also, I think it's important to point out that like the national exit polls are going to be a very different beast than the state by state exit polls. I think that one of the problems we get into when we look at these things is a lot of people will cite national exit polls, but then they look at like exit polls from like Pennsylvania, for example, and there will be some pretty extreme differences there. And what appeals to a California voter, right, a California Kamala voter, might not appeal to the Pennsylvanian potential Kamala voter. And we just got to look at like what is it that the very specific localities want. You did make a statement though that I want to hone in on it because I don't know what you mean. You said the neutering of Tim Walz's progressivism, something like that.
Yeah, like Tim Walz, he ran on several I shouldn't say ran. He just enacted several very progressive things in the state of Minnesota that, we didn't really see a lot of lip service to during the campaign, and they weren't part of Kamala's platform, right? Not in a very sort of unfiltered sense, let's say. Like for instance, Tim Walz implemented like a paid family leave policy. He talks about the free school meals. There was a public option that was implemented in Minnesota. Tim Walz, obviously hate these things or love these things. He did govern, especially when the Democrats finally took control of Minnesota, as a progressive, right? And I think that, he does very well in Minnesota. Minnesota is obviously one of these Midwestern states. Like, I just think that I think one of the biggest mistakes that Democrats, and I feel like, Wick, you're making this mistake, is I feel like people assume that voters that call themselves moderate or that call themselves independent prefer like actually moderate policies, and I just don't see a lot of evidence for that.
Technically,
like,
Bernie's an independent.
yeah, like when you poll when you poll like people on when you poll independents on like who they would rather vote for, Bernie or Kamala when it comes to the hypotheticals versus Trump, and it's not Kamala but like Bernie versus like Hillary in that hypothetical, Bernie does better with independents. Like, this isn't like a super moderate group of people. And I think a lot of people, when they look at a platform like Bernie, they don't necessarily say like, oh, that's a really extremist platform, right? Like, I don't think people have very sophisticated views on that kind of thing.
It's populism, right? I mean, like Bernie is a populist, right? Bernie sells the message, which you can be right wing or left wing, which is that the elites, the corporate individuals that have moneyed interests, are rigging the game in the favor of them, right? And Trump does the exact same thing. I mean, they're very, very similar candidates. That's why so many Bernie bros voted for Trump, right? And the left was like, how the fuck could you vote for Bernie and then not vote for Hillary in 2016? And it's because they looked at Trump in 2016 as the guy who was going to go after corporate interests and the guy that was going to clean up, like, for better or worse, whatever your opinion of that is.
How did the Democrats...
So I do agree. I don't know that that's progressivism, though, that's selling it so much as a recognition that the individuals that are running this country are doing so in their own favor.
Yeah,
right? Because that's the similarity there, not the progressivism, but the populism and the anti-elitism and the willingness to take on big corporations like
You're not wrong on that
big pharma with RFK.
You're not wrong on this. Two things. One, right? I don't think this was an election about the policy issues. I don't think people voted based on the policy issues. I think they voted based on trust. It was an authenticity election. It was, who do I think is actually going to fix these problems, or at least actually, who do I believe? Who do I trust? And Trump, like it or not, people view him as authentic in a way that they just don't with, or just did not with Kamala. And that was a huge problem. I think that policies, it didn't really matter. If they don't trust you, if they don't think you're being straight with them, it doesn't matter what policy you put forward. Right? It doesn't matter how progressive or how conservative you put forward as a policy, right? They don't believe you. They don't trust you, and you feel inauthentic, and so they're not going to vote for you. And I think that we should have this play out. That's the first one. The second thing, right? How do Democrats win the working class back?
So again, like these are
Stop
two issues
attacking
that I
white
think,
men.
well, I mean, again, I
please.
disagree with that characterization, but like, when it comes to what you just said, Wick, like, yeah, like I would say that in general, what the Democrats need to do is they need to offer like a biting policy message. Right now, Biden didn't run in 2020. We have to speak in relative senses, right? Because Bernie didn't run in 2020, right? Or he didn't like win, so he didn't go to the general election. So we can't run this experiment perfectly. Of course, I'm like taking a leap and saying that the more progressive, even more progressive platform, and to be fair, I do think these are better policies. Maybe this is a convenient opinion of me to have, but I do think that that would be a more biting platform, like a more forceful rhetoric that people would adhere to. To your point about authenticity and to Fabian's point about authenticity, there's something to be said about just like proposing something and the fact that it starts a debate. It's like, hey, Bernie Sanders just proposed this. And yeah, you're going to have a bunch of news pundits debating about whether or not that's crazy or not. But it does get people talking. And I think people do respond in general to a strong message. Trump's campaign is insane. It's not a centrist campaign. No one could claim that Trump ran to the center in this campaign. That would be a crazy opinion. He won. And he won in 2016 too.
I don't think that's that. Like in socially, it's very centrist, obviously, right? Like I mean,
we're talking about the economic things because the economy and the immigration issues were things that motivated such a large
deportations.
I'd like to make a point. I recall the exact opposite argument being made in 2022 when all the MAGA candidates lost and the moderate candidates.
This happens every day at the same time. I'm gonna have to look into this. Are we back? Are we good?
Trump's
was it right when I made my point? Wow, that sounds like
it was right when you made your point. Sorry.
Well,
Stacks, what are you doing over there?
Well, anyway,
sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
What was it?
I was just gonna say, like, to the extent that
I missed it.
To the extent that we might make the claim that, like, this election was truly policy neutral, like it just like doesn't matter what policies are getting proposed. Well, I'll just say that I prefer the progressive policies in because I think that they're better. But in 2022, that is a real anomaly because inflation was worse in 2022, and Democrats did substantially better than expectations. The only thing that I can think of that makes sense, like literally the only thing I can think of. So yes, like you could say that the feelings on Roe versus Wade were stronger because it was closer. Now, to be fair, Roe gets overturned like June 21. I think it was June 21. Was it 22? I don't remember, but I think there was a fair bit of distance between the election and Roe v. Wade getting overturned.
Honestly,
it was before the election. I think there was
June.
Yeah, there was a little bit of time for sure.
Well, I think people being raw about Roe was one thing.
You got to remember it was leaked early. Right?
Yeah,
that was the first time that a SCOTUS
right,
decision has ever been leaked because it was so important for the Democrats to win the election based off of something that they had no power to win the election over anyways, because they wanted to trick the American public that way.
People were more raw about abortion in 2022. I think that's probably part of it. But then I think that there's also something to be said about the fact that Democrats are – there's a lot more Democrats who are higher propensity voters than used to be. And the fact that in 2022, the Democrats still lost popularly. They still lost the House, right? So that wasn't like a net good year for Democrats. They gain in the Senate for various reasons. They just outperform expectations in certain elections, but they still lose the House, right? So I think that in combination with like the Democrats becoming the party of educated people who tend to overvote in midterms compared to uneducated people, which is a base that Trump does disproportionately well with, I think that in conjunction with the abortion issue being more raw in people's minds, that explains the overperformance in 2022. That's the only way that I can reconcile those.
Just be clear, though, I'm not just referring to the overperformance, which it's true and it is there, but I'm also referring to the types of candidates that lost, right? Like in 2022, you had the DNC funding in Michigan pro-MAGA candidates because they felt they'd be easier to beat. And they were right? During the primary, the Democrats were funding the most hardline Trump supporters. And those hardline Trump supporters like universally lost in 2022. And the moderates did way better. The moderate Republicans did way better. I just think that
it's possible that's true because of the education. Like midterm electorates are way more educated than general election electorates, and it wouldn't surprise me if people who have like as a population substantially less education are just like more willing to basically vote for extreme policies, right? And that's not a comment on whether or not that's right or wrong. Obviously, vote for whoever people think is right. But I think that probably is what explains why those people relatively outperformed in the midterms, but they perform seemingly just fine in 2024.
$5 from Portland is burning, and I think this is a valid question, kind of thing, a statement, I should say. Yeah, that's his name. Kamala lost because she couldn't answer simple questions like, how will you make things like groceries and gas more affordable with working families? Is
Or
there
I wanted to
truth to that?
what will
quickly.
you do in your first 100 days of office?
I wanted to answer the point that was made before. I'm not
Please.
sure it is like, oh, the more educated people are voting in the midterms. I mean, that could be a factor, but the fact that MAGA candidates were able to win in the primary, a midterm primary over moderate Republicans, would seem to indicate that. I mean, if we're assuming that more educated people are going to be voting for the moderates, which the whole premise is based on anyway, like why would the MAGA candidates be able to win the primaries and then go on to go against the Democratic challengers? I think you see something else going on, which is that extreme policies. I think I agree with Wick. I don't think extreme policies are actually as popular as people think they are. I think that they sound good to some people, and I think like a very vocal minority gets very excited about extreme policies, and they'll be out there talking about it openly. But in terms of appealing to like the vast majority of people, you saw both Trump and Kamala try to moderate their position immensely, especially Trump. I mean, the Republican position on abortion this election has never been so moderate. You have Donald Trump going in and rewriting the Republican Party platform to now abortion is a states' rights issue, as opposed to all the prior ones, which is pro-life, ban it everywhere, right? I mean, this is by far an incredibly moderate position. And that's because you got to moderate, right? I mean, this is moderates are ruling the day, and I think that a lot of people didn't see Trump as super extremist. Maybe perhaps not as much in 2016, but they did trust him more.
I want to piggyback off that, Lactoid, just real quick, because I think that's important, right? Whether you believe him or not, and frankly, I don't, but that's beside the point. Trump was willing to stand up against the pro-life extremists in his party, right? And he was willing to say, no, that's bullshit. I'm doing this. Again, do I believe him? No, I think he's fibbing, but that's neither here nor there. Can you point to a moment that Kamala had that was similar?
I have a question for you.
Well,
Wick.
can you answer that, though? Is there a point where you can point to where Kamala stood up against an extreme position of her party, right, or the left's party, or the progressive policy, right, and said, nah, that's bullshit, we're not doing that?
When you're saying stood up to, you mean just like change the position of something that
I
most
mean,
of the Democratic Party believed in?
publicly denounce it and change it.
Well, I don't know if Trump. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Trump
but I guess
did with the abortion thing. That's he did. Right,
But
again,
it was
whether you
more
believe
just
him or
like
not,
a change in
he did.
policy, which
Right.
Kamala did the same thing with healthcare.
Where
she
did she
moved
publicly
from-
denounce the extreme positions? Like that's all I'm asking, right?
I guess because back to your like Sister Soldier comment about like finding some radical in your movement, who would you suggest that Kamala would distance herself from?
Hassan Piker.
Like some fucking
Running
random-
against,
name.
hold on,
Okay, first off,
running
his-
against.
He's not random. He's the biggest one on Twitch, isn't he?
Hold on, running
understand,
Which
against
politics, yeah.
extremists on Twitter, right? Extreme lefties helped Trump win. Why
Okay,
don't we
but
do
here's
it
the thing.
too?
Here's the thing. Hassan distances himself from Kamala. You know what I'm saying? Like he doesn't like Kamala either. Like he says fuck the Democratic Party every single day on his stream.
Which is why it's an easy choice to publicly
No, but then that's not
sacrifice
on your
him,
side,
basically.
because that's not
Put
even
him on
someone
the
who agrees with
pedestal
you.
and say, this is something that we are against. We do not stand for. This is evil. This is gross. And going at this. This is something that will bind a lot of people. It brings a lot of people to vote, right? And you get to make sure that you introduce Hassan to a wider electorate and in such a way that shows you as opposed, which prevents people from being able to tie you to the extremist like parties and things. Like this worked for Clinton. This is exactly how Clinton won extraordinary victories in 92, in 94, and 96. Right? That's
4
just,
years. It was 3 different elections that he won from one instance of just calling out someone in his own party.
it
Like,
wasn't just one thing he did. This is simply a moment that encapsulated a strategic style of politics.
I mean, because he had, after that moment when he was kind of like floundering as president and the midterms came in and Newt Gingrich came in, he worked with the Republicans on welfare reform, right? So like in many ways, Bill Clinton was able to capture a concept of being in the moderate position throughout all of his presidency and then ride those coattails. Now, some of that is obviously, Perot, right? You know what I mean? Like some of that is that is
sure,
a little
that
bit
is
of
a
an outlier
confounding
because of
vector
that.
variable. I get it, right?
So I don't.
But-
I mean, like I would love to see the Democrats get more moderate, right? But I'm just trying to be honest here about like that there are some other variables there that might have changed that. But I mean, and he also repealed Glass-Steagall, right? So I mean, he worked with Republicans in a way that I think he probably needed to because of Perot, and because there was a big push for financial responsibility.
Speaking of working with Republicans, can we just get a shout out to Manchin real quick? Can we get a public shout out to Manchin with for protecting
Shout
the
out Manchin
filibuster, to
for making the
protecting the
worst Inflation
filibuster,
Reduction Act.
to make the filibuster still a thing? We're gonna need that, boys and girls. Okay, we're gonna need that. We're coming into a Republican trifecta. We are going to need the filibuster.
Oh, yeah, I
So
thought you guys
thank
wanted to get rid of that. And
Thank
pack
you,
the
Joe
court.
Manchin. Thank you, Joe Manchin. Thank you. Just wanted to
No.
say
They
that.
need to wait till the midterms when they have it.
Then they want to get rid of it and pack the court. That's convenient. Yeah.
I don't know who you're talking to. Who do you feel like has that position?
I'm not Wick, and maybe not you, but I feel like as though I have had multiple conversations with people who are saying, "Oh, hold on, pack the court."
We've had a debate.
I know specifically. Pisco supports it. Econoboy, do you support packing the court? I think you said yes to that. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I would pack the court and get rid of the filibuster.
Okay.
Still.
But look at that. Was somebody on this panel, Staxiums?
Wait, sorry.
Why?
No. But you're pointing to hypocrisy, saying that I wouldn't be for ending the filibuster even when we had a trifecta.
Well, hold on. Are you for ending it now?
I don't think that we have the means to, but sure.
On January. Hold on, are you for ending it on January 20th? Let's say.
Yes.
Why would these things be
really with the with the Republican trifecta? You're cool with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What do you think about that?
Okay.
Look, I'm not here to policy debate. I think that's dumb. We'll argue about it later. But
I mean, I don't think.
You established that earlier, so that is a fair defense.
I mean, fundamentally, I don't think it's unreasonable to say like the filibuster creates bad governing incentives. Like it's not a good. It's like the Electoral College. Like, you know, for instance, like let's say that Kamala wins this election but loses the popular vote. What I would say to that is, well, we should still get rid of the Electoral College, but I'll take the fucking W. Like I still think it's better that Kamala's president, right?
Yes.
You know, and so I don't know if there's necessarily a contradiction in that rhetoric, and I would hope that. Like, I so hope that the fucking lesson that Democrats take from this election isn't, oh, reforming our institutions is just like not a thing we should really think about or talk about. Like, hopefully that's not.
I mean, like, I don't understand. I mean, like, I get that you guys are against the Electoral College. I think that's stupid. But like, even if I set that aside, why? Like, what do you stand to gain from something that requires a constitutional amendment when like our country is like so polarized right now that you just know that that's not something that could ever be meaningfully done? Like,
I don't think you need,
at least not in the current. You don't think you need a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College?
Are you talking about the compact?
The National Interstate Voter Compact is like very clearly constitutional, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, that's constitutional, but the problem with that is you have to get the small states on board with giving up their power.
You would have to get at least, you'd have to get 270 votes worth of. It's an uphill battle. I agree. Like getting rid of the Constitution, getting rid of the Electoral College isn't easy. Now, with regards to could you pass a federal bill? I guess I haven't looked into whether or not that would be constitutional. I mean, to the extent that we think it could work, I guess that would be good. But you should still advocate for policies, even if we imagine that they would be difficult to pass. Like I think passing Medicare for all would be difficult, but it still would be good policy. It would be good policy, and at the very least, from a platform perspective, be good politics. Again, like I think that the narrative that I'm unconvinced by. I mean, I'm open to being wrong, obviously. Is that like if Kamala runs more moderate, because we seem to know that the reason she lost is because so many Biden voters sat out. So the argument that we have to make is, which you guys are making coherent arguments for it, I just disagree with them, is that if she runs more moderate,
sat
that
out
is
or
more
switch votes.
Sat
out or
votes
switch votes. Yeah,
switched votes was clearly not a significant reason why Kamala lost this election. That was clearly not the case.
So can I maybe pose a question?
I don't know about that.
Anyway,
hold on. Hold on. You say that clearly.
Point.
Make your argument. I'm curious. Why is that clearly not the case? What data do you have?
Latinos.
Right.
So it's not that there's not some people that switch their votes. Obviously, like that's a group of people that does exist. But the people that Kamala loses in this election are like disproportionately, let's say, she does lose some percentage of Biden voters. Like literally, it was 93% of Biden voters voted for her. Now, normally it's like more like 4 or 5% will kind of switch parties between, So Trump does better with his own base than Kamala does with Biden's base, right? So that's true. But in this electorate, she loses people who didn't vote in 2020, so new voters, and she loses people who voted for someone else in 2020, like former third party voters, let's say. But the big chunk of people she loses is just people who didn't vote at all. She was not able to retain Biden's voter turnout in base. And so the argument that you guys have to make is that's because she ran too progressive. A more moderate message would inspire those people to come out and vote. And like, that doesn't seem convincing to me.
So here's a problem that I have when we do things like polling and like, you find like the overwhelming majority of Americans, for example, support Medicare for all, right? Like that's a progressive position that is popular with Bernie Sanders, and is very, very popular with the American public. And so on its face, it goes, well, okay, I understand the concept of like, well, if that is a position that is a progressive position that's super popular, like why would we not run on that position? And there's two problems that I have with that. And that is number one, popularity with the American public is not everything when the policy harms your donor base, right? Like there are a lot of, Kamala Harris outspent Donald Trump massively, and the overwhelming majority of millionaires and billionaires were supporting her and not supporting Donald Trump. And so that's one. But two is that it's one thing to say this is a popular idea against Americans that haven't scrutinized an idea to an extreme. And it's another thing to say, let's run a national campaign on this where the other side is going to be able to debate that on a debate platform at the presidential debates and rallies and things like that. Like I imagine maybe she would have won if she'd have run on Medicare for all, maybe. But I also can imagine that tying her to being called Commie Kamala or a communist or a socialist when her father is an avowed Marxist, right? When she says certain things that are very reminiscent of that behavior, when she has other policies that are very socialist, and then running on what is a very clear and obvious socialist position. What does the popularity look like when Donald Trump gets on the debate stage and rips her apart for being a communist for having that position? I don't know that stays a winning position. I think there are a lot of Americans that go, yeah, Medicare for all sounds nice until it actually becomes a national debate about that specifically, and you get in the ring with somebody like J.D. Vance or Trump about that. I don't think that's as winning a position as you think, just because the polling data says that it's popular.
Stack seems I know, but I just got to reiterate 100%, and this is my sincere belief based on the data that I've seen. Policy didn't matter this election. It was about authenticity. Who did they trust? Who do they think was better?
Well, yeah, but it tangentially matters, right? Because
true. Yes, there's a lot. There's
the debate about the policy.
Cuts. I get it. Death by a thousand paper cuts.
The debate about
multivariate.
Well, no,
reason,
I don't.
Right? Why she?
No,
lost.
I don't mean that.
It's not just one thing.
I mean
right?
that. No, what I mean is that effective messaging to the electorate is twofold for two different groups of people, right? And Donald Trump is pretty fucking good at this, and Kamala Harris is pretty bad at this. But she does all right with the young people carrying water for her on TikTok and stuff. But it is about vibes. It is about authenticity.
Also,
but it is also.
Didn't she lose Gen Z voters too? Right? Like you guys keep saying she's doing well.
She lost Gen Z males.
But overall, right? She got less of the Gen Z vote. Like more Gen Z voted for Trump than voted for Trump in 2020. Isn't that just true?
I haven't seen that in the latest polling data, but
right, I could be wrong.
Yeah, but again, we
I'm not
have
confident
to keep
in that.
Mind that is true, but again, we have to keep in mind that that's compositional, right? That way less young people voted. So of the young people that remain, those people voted not more for Trump, but she does worse than Biden with young people who voted. But we have to keep in mind that a lot more young people voted. So I think that what we could say is what we could say is the relative enthusiasm of young people to come out and vote for Democrats was lower than the relative enthusiasm of young people to come out and vote for Republicans. Again, young people still vote for Kamala Harris instead of Trump, but again, relatively speaking, she underperforms that group. And again, that's because less of them came out and voted. And so you're always stuck between that ultimate
Well, you
question
didn't have
of,
to come out and vote in 2020.
So I found one
that's really what it is.
CNN.
Come on.
I found that's a big part of it. I found one CNN exit poll. It indicates I think that Trump gained really from switching votes, but then also from new voters as well, right? So among voters who are not first year voters, Trump gained 2 points. So people who had voted in the past, but and voting this time around, obviously, Trump is up 2 points. And in 2020, it was a complete tie. Neither Biden nor Trump were ahead in terms of people who voted in the past. In 2020, Biden was up 32 points in terms of brand new voters. And this election, Trump was up 13%, 13 points for new voters. And that looks like it's a bigger percentage, but you also got to remember that, the 2% of people who have voted is a massive group of people, right? That's a huge swath of people that changed their vote to Trump.
Well, it's
And a lot of
2%
newer
Gen
people.
Z voters, right? Which is a relatively small percentage of the voting base.
I just don't
I think this is just voters generally.
Like 2020 is an
I'll
outlier
post it,
because
yeah,
of mail-in
please.
voting. Right? Like 2020 is an outlier because of COVID. And that's why I think that's a major reason why the Gen Z voted in 2020 was simply because it was easier to vote. Like if you're talking about unenthusiastic voters, right? Like there is a difference between driving to the poll and standing in line and then just being like, oh, well, fucking it's here in the mail. I might as well. Like that's a very different way of voting. And so like, I don't know that necessarily Kamala lost those people that Biden had captured so much as the game was just different because of COVID and election fortification or whatever the hell you want to call it from whatever aisle. But what I'm saying is that policy does matter, but I agree with you, Wick, that like messaging and authenticity matters. And the way that Trump or a charismatic person does this is that they attack the other person's policy and then they utilize that as a means to attack their character and authenticity. So you can't really divorce policy from the quote unquote vibes, right? If you run a super progressive campaign, it becomes easier to paint you as a socialist. And let me tell you, if you want to gain more votes amongst the Hispanic population, that's a great way to do it, is to run against socialism.
I super disagree. Because I can't explain why Bernie super outperforms amongst Hispanic voters in the Democratic primary and amongst hypothetical polls in general elections. Like now, to be fair, we could always say, well, the polls are just wrong. The polls are just wrong. Like they're not true. But
I already explained this, so engage with how I explained it. Where I said there's a difference between popular ideas that haven't actually entered the lexicon beyond like shit that like college educated people read, and then it being on a rally, being on a debate stage constantly with a conservative attacking it. That's a very different thing. There's no doubt in my...
Did Bernie not have a sufficient like attack against his ideas?
But he only had them in Democratic primaries.
But Fabian, are you making the argument?
So
hold on.
What I'm saying is that in Democratic primaries, usually the left tends to run further left in the primary and then try to moderate towards the center, just the same way the right does, right? Because you're for the most part trying to target your base, right? So that is one reason why Bernie can do a little better and his ideas aren't attacked quite as hard, because we're not looking for the moderates, we're looking for the moderate left-leaning people all the way to the far left when we're in a primary process. When you get into the general election, now all of a sudden there's this other half of the country that is the opposite of what you are
on
in
the
terms
Bernie
of the political
question.
spectrum.
On the Bernie question specifically, if your progressive idea can't win you a Democratic primary, right? Because it's just not going to win
because
you.
CNN cheats for you.
Yeah, it's just not gonna win the general either. So if Bernie
not
could
true.
not win on his positions, progressive as they are, in a Democratic Party primary, I don't think that they would have survived to the general. But the one thing that I might be missing here is people view Bernie as honest and genuine. So they may give him a pass on some of the commie policies, right?
I think that there's again, I think that Fabian, to respond to you and then respond to Wig, Fabian, you would have to make the argument that in my view, this election was lost because basically Biden voters in 2020 didn't come out. Now you're saying that's because it was really substantially harder to vote in 2020, or like it was measurably harder to vote in 2024 than it was in 2020. I'd have to look into that.
But I'm saying that's got to be part of it. Like,
well,
that
sure,
has to be some percentage. Is it the main one, or is it minor? Who knows?
Well, sure, but then we have to ask ourselves, why were Republicans more likely to come out and stubbornly vote instead of Democrats? And I don't know if it's stubborn voting. I think in general, what I would say is that a more progressive platform
Republicans already do that, though.
What I would say is that a more progressive platform would inspire like many more, not necessarily new entrants, but old sort of previous entrants to come in and come back and vote around again. On Wick's point, Wick, your point, it just doesn't, one of these things doesn't follow logically. The reason why Democrats vote for centrists in the primaries is because the Democratic base, like the core group of the Democratic base, it's disproportionately kind of like your middle-aged and older black people and people of color who are themselves moderate and liberals. Now, I would totally agree that this platform is just difficult to win in a Democratic primary, but that doesn't mean that it's not a strategically advantageous platform in the primary. This is what Republicans were saying for the last two. In the general, this is what Republicans were saying for the last 2 years. Oh, if only our nominee was Nikki Haley, she would do so substantially better with this group, that group, and this group. And the hypothetical polls seem to indicate that that was true, that this would have been an even bigger landslide if Nikki Haley was the nominee. But she wasn't, because the Republican base just prefers someone else, someone who's less strategically optimal.
2 points. I'm trying to. So first
I do have to
address your situation.
But go ahead.
Yeah. So to address your comparison, I do think that it is substantially more so that Republicans turn out to the polls, right? I think this is kind of obvious, right? There's a reason early voting was swinging Democrat, and as the night went on, the day of the election, every dump Trump got higher and higher, because Republicans tend to want to be on election day with a paper ballot in line at the polls, and they'll vote on the machine if that's all that's available. Right. Whereas I do think the data definitely shows that there is at some degree that young left-leaning voters are less likely to physically go to the poll and are more likely to vote in mail. But again, with this Bernie progressive position, you're not addressing my point, right? Which is that a hypothetical poll where you just grab people randomly and say, what do you think about this policy, is substantively different, for better or worse. It might even go in your favor. But you have to recognize that is not a good indicator of how it will perform in the general election.
That's not what I'm saying.
The general election comes with this national debate about the issue, where a lot of normies get to hear both sides that don't have particularly strong opinions on it.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that if you throw a bunch of people in a room and give them like progressive policies, well, a majority of those people tend to vote for progressive policies, so therefore you should take all those progressive policies and put them into one candidate. Because there's a lot of reasons why, when you put all those progressive policies that a majority of the broad populace support on an issue-by-issue basis, you put them all in one group, I would agree there's a lot of reasons why individuals would vote against you. It's like, hey, there's a lot of voters that are like, I'm anti-abortion, but I don't hate gay people. Or like, I want all these immigrants to be deported, but like Medicare for all sounds pretty all right. Like, there's a weirdly large amount of people. I know it sounds weird from our perspective because we're much more ideologically consistent people, but there's a lot of voters that are just like that, right? What I'm saying is almost like a combination of you and Wick's point, right? Which is that I think one of the advantages of like a progressive platform is not that people say they like progressive policies. It's that it's biting. They are polarizing policies in some extent that I think motivates those Biden voters to come out a second time. And I think that it does lead to a general aura and atmosphere of like, man, and there were a lot of voters like that in this election, man, I disagree with this guy or this lady on policy, on some of these things. I don't know about them, but he's speaking from the hip. They're speaking honestly. They're not listening to the pundits. They're not listening to the establishment. They're just doing things that they genuinely think are good. And I think that does gain you points relative to Kamala's performance in 2024. I don't know if it wins her the election, but I think it yields directionally a better result.
Let me just ask this, okay? And maybe we can get this back on track just a little bit, right? Because again, we're all kind of guessing here. There is some interpretation of the data here, and the data is incomplete. All sorts of. I'm going to start with Stack.
Well, yeah,
Sims
all
on
the
this one, right?
professionals.
I'm going to
Yeah.
start with on Stack Sims on this. I want to go through. What is, if you were in charge of the Kamala campaign, and we could go back in time,
Mhm.
2 months, right? What is one change you would have made, right? One change you would have done differently.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could go just kind of off the bat. I do think that she didn't really adapt to the new media environment. I think
Okay.
that she was kind of playing a pretty consistently traditional campaign when Trump was kind of going off the wall. It's hard to tell if that was advantageous for him. Like, maybe it's possible that that was a disadvantage, that he went on Joe Rogan, that he just went on like Joe Rogan's podcast, Theo Vaughn's, Logan Paul's. But I do think that it kind of made him a little bit more accessible and approachable. So I don't know if we're in a new environment where you kind of have to adapt election campaigns to make sure that you are, you approach it that way instead. So it's possible that would have been a
Fair
better
enough.
vector to
So
approach it.
the media environment, you would have changed how they approach that into some.
Yeah, maybe going on Joe Rogan.
Fair
I
enough.
think that would,
Okay.
yeah, stuff like that.
Kind of boy, thoughts?
But who knows?
so you're asking like if I could change like literally any
You have a
aspect of
time
the
machine.
race.
You go back 2 months in time. You were in charge of the Kamala campaign. She's like, man, I don't know if we're gonna win or not. What is one piece of advice you would give me? What would that advice be?
You know, it's an interesting question. Like, if we're gonna assume that Kamala's gonna remain the candidate, and I think there's evidence that probably she wasn't an optimal candidate. If we could just like pick anybody, but if Kamala's gonna remain the candidate, I would say that honestly, just like take her 2019 platform, just run on that. Like, don't change a lot of these progressive platforms. And again, I'm not saying that change in and of itself is enough to literally just win her this election. But I do think, again, it puts her in a better spot in an environment where incumbent governments across the planet are just like conservative, right wing, left wing, center left governments across the planet are all losing right now because of this period of inflation that we had in general. Like, their backs are ultimately against the wall. They do better than they otherwise would, and I think they do better than they otherwise will in 28 if they nominate a progressive and run on progressive policies.
Okay, Fabian, you want? Okay, let's assume you want her to win. Okay, none of this sabotage shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't. I didn't vote for Trump because I won't vote for a socialist. So obviously, I wouldn't be a pro Kamala guy. But if I was in charge and I wanted her to win, I probably would have done two things. Number one, I would have leaned towards support for Palestine more. I think I would have said fuck the donors that are like creeping the fuck out about pro-Israel, because it killed her authenticity. Even though I understand why she did it, it destroyed her ability to look authentic to a lot of people. And if she would have played up the pro-Palestinian position a little bit more as a means of why we need to negotiate with Israel, and been like, look, I'm not against the Israel. I understand the right to defend themselves, but we're not putting troops there, and we're not going to continue funding wars in this regard. Like, you know, if you want help and aid from us, you're going to have to fucking come to the table and give us concessions, because we're not going to keep funding this. And then the second thing I would have done is I would have reached out to union leaders, and I would have created some form of probably some socialist policy, to, you know, like kind of like the CHIPS Act. Even though I'm completely against it, it was very popular among the left, and among centrists. And I would have done something similar for American manufacturing, and I would not have let Donald Trump and tariffs completely grab the white working class. I mean, I think he owned the white working class because she had zero positions for the white working class, mostly because Democrats have a general disdain for white people and a general disdain for men. And I think many white voters, and especially black men, felt this. And she probably wouldn't have lost as many black men if she had done that as well, too.
Fair enough. Lactoid, same thing. Again, no sabotage. You actually want her to win. Okay. What are you doing?
I think I would copy the policy as to reaching out to unions. I would select Shapiro as the Veep Definitely not Tim Walz. I think that was a horrific disaster. On the kind of the sort of DEI kind of culture war issues, I would have been advised her, I guess, or I guess if I controlled the campaign, told her to just be more right wing on that, and just like basically take the position of like these kids are these kids are ridiculous. And I would disagree with the Palestine issue. I do think that you're going to lose more voters if you do that than you would gain. So I think those are kind of the two main ones: the union thing, and then go more right wing on the DEI stuff, and then maybe the economic proposals. Were horrible, and they seem to be pretty unpopular generally. Don't propose those.
Like
either
the
keep it,
homeowner thing or the child tax credit, or like what specifically?
the tax on unrealized gains, the
Oh,
rent
sure.
control, and like the price gouging stuff, like the stuff that she was attacked for a lot, because I mean it was just economically illiterate, and it also doesn't hit like a very wide portion of people. Like I think perhaps instead of any of that, she probably could have been like pushing for a higher minimum wage. I mean, that would have been like a broader, like left wing economic proposal that would have gotten people out to vote.
I think when it comes to, I don't know if this is closing or anything like what you're asking, but
No, it's not. Just we are
I'm
going to
gonna
get to
interrupt.
closings.
Well,
We got
how
to
do we get out of here
respond.
soon?
I'm gonna respond to
Uh,
Lactwood for just a second. I don't think that like economic capabilities was on the ballot because like every economist, when it comes to economic policy, like obviously Kamala's policies were far and away better. Like you can be critical of rent control, and I'm critical of rent control. You can be critical of the whatever
The
policy.
tax on
The
unrealized
fucking
gains.
tariff, like 100% tariffs on all countries that are importing, like ensuring that we're so protectionist
Well, that was
we
never
can't.
a position.
Well, that was what he stated. Like if you're just
No,
saying
he
that
never
we can't
stated
even
that.
trust.
No, he said he wouldn't do that to Chinese cars and built in Mexico, and then he
You're saying
got them to shut down the factory.
Sorry,
Not
sorry, you're
100% tariff on all goods.
Or another thing that
Against
she
the
could have
tariffs,
done,
bro. I'm just saying,
she
like-
could have
like-
done is she could have taken perhaps like an anti-tariff position, and like somehow found a way to respectfully disagree with Biden and say, yeah, like we currently have some Trump era tariffs that are causing like increased costs. I'm going to get rid of those to reduce costs. I'm also going to increase minimum wage to increase wages. I don't know. Like there could be like some way of arguing it, but
You're right.
I think on the economy, she was bad.
Across the
We
board
need to
tariffs
just be
of 10 to
socialists.
20% on all imports.
She should have advocated
I
for
hate tariffs.
socializing
I just like
production.
he didn't say that.
Yeah, I don't think that would have been successful at Conaboy. I don't think that.
I think it would have.
I don't think so.
She comes out with one of those Russian hats on, you know, just like linen.
Well,
just like her dad.
What we do know, right, that almost regardless of why, the Democrats lost the House, the Democrats lost the Senate.
Is that
We don't know that yet, Wick.
The House?
We don't know that yet.
It's gonna happen.
Come
It's
on.
gonna happen.
You don't know that
yet.
Republicans have flipped 5 seats so far, right?
Hey, Kamala could still win Alaska, okay? You don't know anything.
Yeah, sure. Is this like the Bernie
Whatever you
Cope
need,
back from
whatever you need.
2016?
So
I have a question.
something has
Yeah, sorry.
got to change. Something has got to go different. We cannot afford another loss like this. Okay, we simply cannot. So we have to figure out what went wrong. And there's probably, as everyone here has said, a myriad of factors, okay, of what went wrong.
Alaska just
We're going to
got
get to
called.
closing statements. Then I have a couple callers who want to call in, and I promised them some time. So we're going to give them some time. But I want to give you each some closing statements. Gang, we got a lot of stuff coming up. This isn't the only discussion we're going to have here. We're going to be talking about this as we go through. And we're going to probably dissect a little bit. I will say, if you like the stream, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Can I just say, just before we get to closings, I have, since last night, bled subs, okay? Bled them. I am down like 120, maybe more at this point. And I'm not sure if it's just because political season's over in a lot of people's minds.
It's because you went moderate. You need to go more extreme.
Or
in order
that.
to
Or a lot of
cater to
people
more.
don't like the me just saying, hey,
telling
we
them what they don't
fucked
want to
up,
hear.
right? We really fucked up, and we need to look at it. I don't know which it is, or a combination of both, but whatever. So I could really
gained
use your
subscribers.
support. I could really use your sub. I could really use your monetary support as well. So feel free, if you think that that's something you want to contribute to, you want to see more of, by all means. But I want to give each of these a closing statement. My closing statement is simply this: Biden would have won. Okay, Staxiums, go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly just going to reiterate my original points, which were that like nearly all the OECD countries lost their incumbents, including the LDP of Japan. I just sometimes there's not a lot that you can do. I do think that there are some things that we can do, but it's an uphill battle for sure. Also, just to criticize you a little bit, Wick, you played that Jake Tapper video at the beginning. That is edited a little dishonestly. She actually outperformed Biden in 58 counties, and if you extend the clip like a minute, it shows him showing that.
58 out of how many?
Oh, like 1,000. No, for sure.
1,100.
Okay.
No, for sure. Look, hey, who cares about truth now, Wick?
Fair-
I thought
fair
even
enough.
if it's negligible,
Okay, you know what? Fair.
bitch.
Fair. True. I'll take the L on that one.
Thank you. No,
where
I
can people
agree
find
she-
you? Where can
she
people find
underperformed,
you?
Of course. I'm Staxiums everywhere. I mostly post on TikTok, but you can find me Twitter, YouTube, elsewhere as well.
Thank you for being here. We'll have you on again. I apologize. And to be clear, there's about 3,000 counties in the U.S.
Sure. No,
so
100%. It's
Okay.
basically
no,
0%.
I
but-
get you. Boy, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think that, in my view, I just think directionally, I don't know if Kamala wins if she runs on a substantially more progressive platform. I just think she does better than she did in this election. That's for all the reasons that I mentioned. I think it would make her look more authentic. I think that Democrats would be more inspired to come out and vote for that platform. Ultimately, look, we'll see if we have elections come 2028, which is an interesting follow-up debate. I'm sure Wick will schedule at some point.
Wait, do you think we won't?
Goes just fine. Well, I think that we probably will. I'm mostly joking, but like,
Okay,
I think that if Trump does what he says he's going to do, the economy is going to literally be in such a terrible state come the midterms that Democrats will win an FDR level of Democrats. Like, even though they're going to have like 55 senators, they flip the Senate even in like 2026. If he does 20% universal tariffs and deports 10 million undocumented immigrants, the economy will literally go into the worst recession since the Great Depression. That is just what will happen. And I think that would cause a lot of people to come out. That will cause Biden voters to come back and vote. And that's why I say that it's probably the case that if Biden does what he says he's going to do, you could elect even a centrist Democrat and that person will end up winning. I just think that it's important to think all else equal about these kind of things, because I think we win even more if we elect a more like left-leaning person, like whoever that ends up being from the progressive depth chart. I think that what I've said about 2024, I should say, the Democrats have a big depth chart. Like, there's actually a lot of good options for the next Democratic primary. So I'm sure that it'll be a robust primary come 3 years from now when it starts kicking off. I'm sure at least the base will agree on whoever rises to the top, and we'll just all get behind that person. So,
well, thank you. Where can people find you?
Kind of Boy on YouTube and Three Wonks and Live and Learn, all these things. Yep.
Check him out, gang. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate you, even though I think you're wrong, but that's okay. I'm sure you think I'm wrong, but I still love you.
We'll see.
Still, you're a
We'll
great
see
guy.
what it looks like.
Okay. Fabian Liberty, go ahead.
I think the winds of a change are upon us. I think Trump has shown that populism is probably going to be the name of the game in the next 20 years of U.S. politics. Whether that is left-wing populism or right-wing politics, I think that is just kind of what's going to happen. I wish the left would moderate, but I think what lesson the left will likely take from this is exactly what Boy is pushing. I think what they're going to think is we need more progressivism. We need more corporations are bad. We need to run heavier on price gouging and run heavier on rent control. And we're going to see people pop up that are going to be for nationalizing certain industries. And I fear this, not just because I fear the left, but I also fear the right's reaction to this, because my ardent and true and hopeful goal of populism is that we get more fiscal conservatism and liberty-minded people and deregulation and, less corporate power in the United States politics. But I think what we're likely going to see is we're going to see the left look to heal their wounds by coming back more progressive, more socialist, more disastrous economic policies like the ones Econo Boy puts forward as good. And more raised fist, more Marxist flags like the one that's behind him that shows
Fuck
that
yeah.
he genuinely is a racist, horrible person, because that's what the progress flag
Is it
is
the American
queer
flag?
theory.
Is that what you're referring to?
Come on.
Fuck that flag too, but but no, I don't think we're gonna run. I don't think we're gonna learn the right lessons from this. I think we're going to see the rise of fascism on the right, and I think we're going to see the rise of more socialist progressivism on the left, and hopefully I'm going to do everything I can to moderate the right, as that's kind of where I sit in those regards, and push people more towards sensible deregulation instead of sweeping fascistic change. And just buckle up, right? Because Trump won on populism, and populism is here to stay. I don't think you're going to win as a moderate. As much as I want them to do that, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to come forward and trash, more hate for white people, more hate for men, more equity, more diversity, equity, inclusion, etc. And it's going to have a lot of shit is going to happen from that.
Okay, where can people find you?
Fabian Liberty. People keep following me on Twitch every time I say that, but like I don't stream to Twitch anymore, guys. Like I'm gonna get banned if I stream to Twitch. Like that's why I'm on YouTube, and Twitter, and yeah, I do have Rumble, but I don't really do much on there. I might end up doing some stuff there. So thank you.
Just to reiterate, all links to all these guys are in my YouTube description. Please click on those links. Give them a follow. They spent their time to come on my show. Let's spend some time to click on their links. Blacktoid finishes out, and then we have 2 callers I want to get to, and then we'll let you guys go. Blacktoid.
Okay. Yeah. So going back to the prior question, what would I change? Another thing that I think I would change in the campaign here is that, there was a lot of insinuation that JD Vance was weird and that he was bad. And it turns out that based on the interviews and the debate, he turns out to be extremely normal. In fact, probably more normal than the other 3 candidates, right? Walz, Harris, or Trump. And I think this is part of a pattern of the party that's saying that you can trust them, that they are the ones with integrity. That in reality, like they were consistently lying. They were misrepresenting and lying about not only Trump but also JD Vance and a lot of different things. And I think that created a sort of aura of distrust. And there was a distrust because of this lying constantly and the radical beliefs, that were, although they were expressed in 2019, sure, they may have not been brought up or tacitly denied or vaguely denied in 2020 or 2024. But how can you trust that, right? Because the trust is already broken to begin with. So I think no trust and a fear of radical progressivism were big contributors to this election loss for the Democrats. That was the big reason for me, right? I mean, this was the first election that I ever voted Trump. And it was also the first election that I canvassed for president. And this was in a swing state. And for me to do that, it had to be, in my opinion, pretty serious to do so. And I think I made the correct decision. So to the Republicans, I think the black pillars, you guys were wrong. The court is secure. Stocks are up. Things are looking good, but continue to push for libertarian policy. Push Trump hard for libertarian policy. He's not going to do it unless you push him hard. And that's the only goal at this point. The work is absolutely not over. The work really is just beginning. And then to Democrats, I mean, I'm sorry. For my little moment of gloating here, you guys were destroyed, right? Told you so. Fuck the 13 keys. Trust the betting markets. Polymarket is good. It is accurate. When Polymarket says something, listen to it. It is speaking to you. It is the crystal ball that predicts all things. And once again, it was correct. If you like what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. You're wrong and dumb about the betting markets, but that's okay.
Actually, I saw.
Fair enough.
Oh, sorry,
but let's bring on the people who paid me to talk to you. So, Lawson Harrison, you have a question that you wanted to ask. I'll let you ask it. You've paid the money to do so. Go ahead.
What's up, fellas?
Hello.
What's up, Lawson?
Oh, not much. I had a question for Econo Boy.
Yeah, sure.
So this is going to be kind of loaded, and I know most people are going to disagree with it, but like you know where the economy's at, right? Versus like the perceptions of where the economy's at. And my question is like, how do we address a problem that like a politician that goes up and says, "Hey, this problem is actually the most of the public's fault." Like that's political suicide, so that's not an option. So how do we address a problem that's like not even really a problem? You get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think I'm open to the idea that Democrats were just doomed this election because incumbent governments across the world are just like taking L after L. There are some exceptions. I mean, like Modi's government does actually survive in response to this, but again, like that's an example of almost like a generationally popular political figure who still takes losses but is ultimately able to maintain power. That's a big, that's a big question for me is like I think that the progressive politics and stuff like that probably helps the Democrats, but does it actually cause them to win? I'm very unsure about that. I'm actually very unsure about that. I think there's a path to like if we imagined like a truly optimal like Democratic candidate process and messaging campaign and platform, like there's probably some room to like maybe lose the popular vote but win the electoral college because the margin in like some of these swing states is probably winnable if you get enough people to go out and vote. But even that's that question. And so I'm not sure. And I think there's also just like principled questions, like to the extent that people would say, well, we should moderate significantly on our social messaging. Like, okay, like what, is that the right thing to do in some like intrinsic sense? Like, I don't know. Like I asked the question on my stream. It's like, if Mitt Romney was the Democratic nominee, would we have won this election? And that's an interesting question. I don't know that the answer is yes to that question. Would we have done better in this election? I don't know if the answer is yes to that question, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because like I can't prove this is just my suspicion, but I have a strong feeling that that the way Americans feel about the economy is largely like 70% plus due to poor spending habits. But you can't tell people that because then they freak out. So it's like I don't know. It's
what you
frustrating.
can tell them is no, your spending habits are fine, but it's those people's spending habits that we need to get under control, and those people's spending habits are the problem. People will respond great to that. So.
Yeah, if you're in that 30% wick, I can say that to you. You're right.
That's all I'm saying. But any other?
I would just like to add, it's actually your spending habits. The biggest problem is that you're not subscribed to Wick TV or to Fabian Liberty, and that you're not getting the.
That's where you're wrong,
you
sir.
Need to have a better. I didn't say you. I'm speaking to the people. All right, I'm to the people. Sure, like to the masses. If you had done that, then maybe you'd be a little bit better informed about the issues.
Okay,
Fabian, whenever I'm down in the dumps, I just watch your conversation with Toyolo. Cheers me up every time. All right, thanks for having me on.
Thank you later, buddy.
Bye.
That was a frustrating ass conversation.
Was it?
Well, yeah, hello there.
He's crazy, but it's fun.
Okay. What's up, Artemis?
What's going on?
I don't know. You want it on? You paid to be here. Here we are.
Oh, yeah. No, you told me I could come on. I didn't have to pay to be here.
You gave me money, so
yeah. I mean, that's money is money. I don't care about
that.
So how did Debbie's election predictions work out?
It worked out pretty good. I followed the betting markets.
There are two things I was wrong about. Okay, my map was off by 3 states. Okay, that's a big deal. I'm not pretending otherwise, right? I think I got Pennsylvania wrong. It looks like I'm getting Michigan and Wisconsin wrong too, right?
Yeah,
I underestimated Trump.
Yeah,
I underestimated Trump for sure. Like I thought it was gonna be closer. I thought he was gonna win, but
why would so not? Well,
I just I wanted to keep going because there's a second thing I was wrong about, and I think it's very important to understand like what we get wrong, so we can not get that wrong in the future, right? Coming into this, I thought J.D. Vance was going to be an anchor around Trump's neck. I thought that he was going to be someone that couldn't pull his weight nationally. That was a mistake. That turns out to have been wrong. So we have to acknowledge I got that one wrong. That is something that I got wrong. That's just true.
I'm actually. Can I ask you about that a little bit more? Because like when I saw J.D. Vance, the first thing I said is like the guy who wrote Hillbilly Elegy the guy who is one of the few intellectuals in right-wing politics at a high level, right? I mean, like there are not a ton of right-wing people that are incredibly educated and just think and speak like an intellectual, right? I mean, if you read his article on like why we need to abandon libertarian economics in the right wing, et cetera. So like when I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't like him, but this is obviously a winner. And the left was like, bad vibes, weird. And I was just like, what is like, I don't like, I saw so many people on the left immediately dismiss him and I didn't get it.
Yeah, I'll give you my reasoning here, right? Is much of the same reason why I was hesitant over Kamala, right? I was hesitant over this guy. He screams inauthenticity to me from his flipping the script on his opinions on Trump, from calling him America's Hitler to being his running mate. That screamed inauthenticity to me, right? The fact that a lot of the people in Ohio specifically had very, I thought, and I still think, valid criticisms of him, right? That informed my choice here, right? That, and plus he was wonkish, right? He was, in his writing and things, it was very wonkish. And it just didn't sit right with me. I read that wrong. That was a wrong reading on my part. But those were the touchstones I was using in order to inform my opinion on the man. So
I got a few things. Yeah. I got a few things about that.
Please.
One about the about JD Vance. Do you think your lack of keeping up or looking into JD Vance gave you the opinion of inauthenticity? Because people who watched his political evolution over the period of 7 years watched him go from being anti-Trump person
I think
to
that,
slowly getting to
I can
this
just
point today.
cede to that. Yes, the fact that I didn't follow him closely for 7 years did make it so I misjudged him. Yes, that's just true.
Okay, because right now Ohio went for Trump even more so now than it did in both elections prior.
That's true almost
Gotta
across
hop out
the
of
board.
here.
Yeah, I'll see you later, buddy.
So just make sure nobody had anything for me, but pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
So what about that? Yeah. So what about the Des Moines poll? Why did you think that was,
simply the
real?
history that she had called it right in so many previous times. So I thought we should take it seriously, because she had been right almost every single time.
You think she got paid off for that?
Yes, I 100% do.
In rather than she was just wrong one time.
But like overwhelmingly wrong. Like
Correct.
we're talking. This is like similar to saying I think California's going red. Like it's that level of insanity. And
what motivation would you have to mislead a poll?
So I've heard. Here's the motivation. I've heard this, and I haven't fully dug into this, but there are some proportion of voters that will go and vote for who they believe is going to win. And so if you can create the aura that somebody's going to win before an election, you could potentially boost the numbers by some percentage. That's the argument I've heard, and that there was some kind of payment arrangement.
There was an argument I've heard many times on the left that the right was doing bullshit polls
on
in
Polymarket,
order to push a Trump narrative. That was something that a lot of people on the left were dead set on. That these were manufactured fake polls. I heard that over and over again.
Sure,
and the Polymarket too, right? The whales.
Conspiracy theories are like I do think what.
Don't say conspiracy theories because you guys already look like
evidence for this.
I'm glad you didn't see the evidence of the Trump either.
I think by definition it is a literal conspiracy theory.
Just blind.
To be fair to Saxiums.
Well, okay. Well, here's I would also say that there is a fairly large part. Like I've definitely seen the argument that if you feel like your candidate is ahead, you feel like you don't have to go to the polls to win.
So that's the other side of the coin. But again, the argument I've heard is like factoring that in, you still get a slight bump if it looks like you had the momentum. Now look, I don't know. I have no evidence that she was paid off. That's why I phrase it as a question. Do you think she was paid off? Because when you go from Iowa, so from like the polls had consistently, all of them, been putting Trump 5 to 8 points ahead, right? And then you have all of a sudden Harris is ahead by 4. I mean, by somebody who claims to be like a very accurate and reputable pollster, this is a massive flip.
Who has been?
Who was, right? Which again kind of furthers the conspiracy theory a little bit of, I mean, was she paid? Was there something else going on here? why all of a sudden
How
this
does that-
ridiculously inaccurate call comes out of nowhere.
So here's my I'll
It's
actually
so
give
ad
you a
hoc
legit-
because if she were historically inaccurate, you would also say that that's
Well,
evidence.
no, because no. If she was
hold
historically inaccurate, it'd be
Hold
more
on.
likely that she was just fucking wrong again.
Hold on. I'll give you a legitimate actual explanation for why I think it is that I have the opinion I do. If you have a massive disparity with everybody else, and those people usually more like Emerson, all these other ones are relatively accurate for Ohio, and you have a massive disparity, you would usually check to see if that was a polling miss by redoing the polling again, just to confirm that the next poll looks similar to the first one that you did.
Sure, but you can't poll the entire state. Like the sample sizes are always going to have some form of margin of error. Like I don't
Yeah,
know
but
how.
she chose those specific groups for some reason. That's the issue I have. She laid heavily into the female older woman and championed that was going to flip Ohio.
Do you have any further
Iowa.
subject? Like look, I don't. The single poll isn't the story of this election, right?
No,
I think we have a larger story, but
don't.
It's your
yeah.
time to shine. But we do I do have to eat at some point, so you know
Okay.
what I mean.
So here's my biggest issue, right? At almost no point in this entire race did it ever show that Kamala was outpacing Joe Biden in really anything. She was losing in almost every demographic, which that showed up in the election results. But everybody on the left were saying, no, she's got it in the bag. Cheeto Hitler's going down. And I kept warning people, don't believe these fucking people who are really, really bad at predicting outcomes from elections. Like, I think that everybody on the left who was like, Trump had no shot, that Kamala was going to sweep, are fucking delusional, and they don't represent the average American.
I
They
think
should-
that
Go ahead.
something I find a little frustrating about the smugness, honestly, of this
who?
kind of attitude, you in particular. Not to call you out, but I'm calling you out.
That's fine. You can.
I do feel like you didn't vote. Who did you vote for in 2020?
I didn't. I haven't voted since Obama, and I voted
Okay.
for Obama.
Okay, but the more people voted in 2020 than they did
Yep.
now.
And you know why?
So like you are no. What I'm trying to say is you are not this like slice of the average American that you think you are. I don't think
Hold
that. I think that it's weird when you purport yourself to be one
Mhm.
because the average American agrees with you this time.
So that is a really, really superficial take on the 2020 election because everybody was locked down. Voting was almost universal mail-in availability. Ballot harvesting, which is not illegal, is legal to do, is a lot easier to do in cities. The turnout was always going to favor Democrats heavily. Hold on. The fact that democracy was on the ballot this year and that Hitler himself was going to destroy the Constitution should have turned out everybody against him. Somehow, he has still maintained his... he's almost going to pass his 2020 numbers. What happened to the Kamala Harris voters who believe the bullshit that you guys are talking about?
Okay, I don't feel like you really contend with my point there, which is essentially that you're purporting yourself to be, oh look, I'm the average American. Here's how I feel. I think that is not true. It just happens to be true this one time. Does that make sense? Like I don't know if you're this crystal ball. I don't know you're this. I don't think that you're this crystal ball of the way that the American populace is going to shift.
Okay, is the American population majority conservative?
Yes.
Is the majority of the American population?
No. Sorry, no, absolutely not.
The answer is yes. Obviously,
conservative.
Yes, because your definition of conservative can be literally anything. I know you people do change words around all the fucking time. So we're gonna answer yes because I know how you guys play this game.
Okay.
Do the majority? Well, I say majority. A large, about 49% of the people religious. Plurality. Yeah, thank you. Are they religious?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Are a plurality or a majority of the people in the United States not college educated?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I can easily fucking tell you what the outcome is going to be based off of just these easy understand values.
Okay.
Okay. Like what happened in 2022? Like I could play this game.
Roe v. Wade happened.
Okay. It's
Easy.
I
It's
think what I'm
really
trying to do
easy.
is like you are ad hoc, like
I
retro.
predicted that.
Okay. All right.
I want to say two things. The first thing is I do think it's a little bit funny. And I understand that, like, yes, people that go on Twitch streams are not going to be representative of the country, but like, you made the assumption about me and Scott and Artemis now, and all three of us, you were wrong, right?
Okay. That's fair.
And the other thing is, just, I mean, not to like get you guys black pilled too much, and because I mean, again, this is going to come across as smug. There's no way for me to make it not sound smug.
This is revenge for when Lactoid was on my
a little bit.
2022 stream. And
it's like, yeah, a little bit, yes, and look, I can take it, so I can dish it out. That's the way it works.
We can.
I know you can. I know you can.
Oh.
I play the game. Like, if you guys look, if sometime in the future I'm totally wrong, dump on me. That's totally fair. Totally fair. Do you guys realize like how fucked you are in the court right now? Like, has it really set in?
That's everyone is thinking about that. Of course, we're gonna have a 7-2 Supreme Court for the next fucking 2 decades.
I know it's not gonna be 7-2. So I don't think, right. Here's what's gonna happen. Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are going to retire within probably the first year, I think, of Donald Trump taking office, and he's going to put on 2 people from the Federalist Society that are probably in their 30s or 40s. Okay, and just by that alone, he's going to have 5 picks, and there's going to be an originalist Federalist Society control of the court for at least the next 20 to 25 years. Okay?
I don't feel like that's any.
And that's
what I said.
Well, because it's still 6-3 at that point. Yeah. You're right. It's possible that if Sonia Sotomayor does pass during his term, then it's going to be 7-2.
I think it's relatively likely.
Is she going to pull an RBG?
And that's going, by the way, for the next 20 to 25 years. You can win next time, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You're fucked.
I do have
Wick,
to eat.
You guys are fucked.
I do
How does
have
that
to
feel?
eat, right?
Okay, I'll do my last final thing here.
Last final thing, and then we'll close out.
So I had been subjected to the smuggest fucking lefties for over a year now, telling me that I was delusional about the results that were going to be coming. And then when I come to gloat about the fact that they were totally fucking wrong and delusional, I've been now accused of being smug myself, even though I've earned that right to be smug because you fucking people had no idea what you were talking about.
Well, I can't speak for Staxium's arguments. I mean, Artemis, obviously what we argued about a few days ago was whether or not, you know, and it's surprising you're not talking about how much of a problem voter fraud was in this election.
I've already told you.
It's a curious thing.
You mean the one where you said that it wasn't happening, and then... Oh, you remember when you said that it wasn't happening, and I showed you Lancaster and multiple counties in Pennsylvania?
Or it's curious that it's happening, and we don't see reporting of a huge widespread problem with voter fraud or the problems.
You know why?
That you're talking about.
Because this was
the Republicans won.
No, because this was the most scrutinized fucking election in history.
Yes. It was so scrutinized that the problems that you brought up that were happening during the election just all of a sudden didn't materialize.
They're still materialized. What the fuck are you talking
like
about?
What I said.
Hold on, they literally talking about. Are you lying right now?
Good system for catching voter fraud.
Why are you lying right now? Why are you lying right now?
I saw a video of a ballot box on fire.
Yeah,
that
Portland,
is an indication of where the Biden supporters were.
That's suspicious.
In that one ballot box.
Okay, so the issue I have with all this is, one, Econo Boy is directly lying to the audience.
Okay.
Pennsylvania caught widespread voter fraud. And they're investigating now to figure out why the Arizona canvasser
I was right that we have a good system for catching voter fraud. So I was right that we have
by the Republican Party actively looking for it.
I was right.
You weren't right. You were wrong. You said it wasn't happening and it was caught.
Okay. It's not, but it also did.
You lit it. How? What he said that it was happened. It happened.
What was
happening
wasn't a big deal. They caught the small amount.
It wasn't a big deal. Okay, that's because your outcome determinative logic, not that. We didn't win through fraud. Therefore, it's not a big deal. You're fucked.
We have a whole long time that we are going to be covering this topic. Conversation will happen again. We will have more people talk about these and much more. Gang, I will leave you simply with this. If you are a Democrat and you are disappointed about the results of last night, which I am, right? I did vote for Harris. I am sad that Trump won. This is no time to bury our heads in the sand. This is no time to give up. This is no time to cry. What we do now is we dust ourselves off, we pick ourselves up, we roll up our sleeves, and we get to work One of the things that you'll learn in politics, because I've lost elections before, gang, 2000, 2004, 2016. There's always a next time, and there will be a next time. Let's get in there. Let's figure out what we did wrong this time and figure out why it is that the voting electorate will vote for liberal policies, but they won't vote for liberal politicians. Figure out why that is, okay? Figure out why the Democratic Party has lost the Americans' trust. Then we fix it. Then we go forward. I love you all, even you. I'll see you guys on the flip side. We'll probably do something tomorrow, maybe call-ins or something. I know a lot of people want to say,
That was
wait, bye-bye,
beautiful.
everyone.
I
Bye.
can kiss you on the mouth.